Okay, I'm going to call the March 13, 2018 meeting of the Shelburne Board of Select Board to order. As everyone knows, next 30 seconds are my favorite 30 seconds of the year because I get to be in charge of the meeting very briefly. So the first thing that we'll do, this is the first meeting after town meeting. So we have an unorganized select board right now. And the first order of business to become an organized board, and this is set forth in the town charter, is for the election of a chair and then vice chair. There could be a number of very creative ways for me to do this, but we will do this the way we have in the last few years. And I will simply ask a member of the select board, no particular order, whoever speaks up first, I suppose, to make a motion. If that motion is seconded and then passed, to nominate and then approve a member as chair, I will hand the metaphorical gavel over to that person. So
since I'm in the middle, I'd like to say something first.
yes.
And that I've been on the select board now for 4 years, and for 2 of those years, I've worked with Jerry Story. And while he and I have not agreed on some topics, we have agreed on others, and he has always been polite and articulate. And I think he would make an excellent chair, and I'd like to nominate him as chair.
Okay, there's a motion by Colleen to nominate Jerry as a board chair. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a tie. I'll give it to Mary, seconded. So there's a motion on the floor for Jerry to be the board chair for the year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And Mr. Story abstained. So Jerry, I think, well, we can wait until after the vice chair one is done. So Jerry, I pass the meeting over to you and the remainder of the agenda. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm honored by the selection and inspired by the confidence with which it was made. I'm sorry, Jerry. And I don't need to repeat that for posterity. Is there a nomination for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Jamie Hines.
I hear a second.
Second?
Second. Any discussion? If not, will those approving signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed saying nay?
Abstain.
Thank you. Jamie is elected
Thank
vice
you.
chair.
So
And let's switch places.
Jerry, it might be
Yeah,
appropriate
you guys.
for you to
We're all gonna
take
slide
Oh,
left.
Colleen's.
that's all right with me. I don't mind. Colleen's
Well, because then
deserving.
Jamie should,
Oh,
I think, this is what the plan,
Well,
Set up
if
the,
you
uh,
two switch,
pictures
I'm
if
happy
we're all
to
gonna
stay
stand
here.
up.
I think, Jerry, if you just sit in the middle, we're good, right?
the vice chair here, and then I'm going to take a picture, a group picture.
Okay.
So maybe if the chair and the vice chair sit, we're going to do a quick group photo for the website. Take 2 seconds. We'll switch their Jerry and Jamie. And the 3 others stand behind them. That will work out
maybe
excellently.
take it quick before Sean calls me a thorn.
I will.
Too soon.
I think the chair, I thought the chair and the vice chair were going to sit on those chairs, and the other 3 will sit behind them, or stand behind them.
How else are we going to go like this?
Yeah. All right, good. Gather together, gather together, come on.
Everybody to stand, no?
All right, ready?
Absolutely.
I'll take a few. 1, 2, 3.
Hey.
Uh-oh. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Excellent.
Okay.
Want one with
I hope that was the tough, no, I actually don't. All right, sorry, Jerry, you're up.
Thank you again.
I did.
The next order of business is to designate accounts payable and payroll warrants for the select board.
Okay, I don't know if I passed these out, but I sent them around. Now I'm looking for the sheet that Peter sent out.
This one, you got it.
Yep. So hopefully everyone received this today, either on email here. You can, I'm sorry, pass it around.
We can share.
copy? Yeah, yeah.
Make sure these dates work. There's a designated select board person and an alternate, I think
Yes.
every week or every other week to check payables with the finance director, Peter Frankenberg. These are one of the recommendations from our auditors and something that we've been doing on a regular basis.
Point of order, I assume that we can switch if something comes up.
Yes.
Then I have no problem.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Mary, some of us can just cover for others. Some will have vacation times, and we just make the adjustments amongst ourselves.
Informally.
Yeah, do you need a motion to formally approve this?
Might as well.
So be it. Do I hear a motion to approve the accounts payable and payroll warrants as presented?
So moved?
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, will those approving signify by saying aye?
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next item of business is to adopt rules of procedure. Would you like to introduce that?
I can do that. There have been pretty standard rules of procedure in the past, and what I have done is I thought that there would be advantages to broadening some of the parts and also trying to align the rules with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns model rules. So as a starting point, I did that, and so the what I would recommend doing, I've made some minor changes to the existing rules, which are for the select board who has the comment are in italics. And the only real major change, other than some wording changes, is on number 16 that allows the, it says, these rules may be amended by a majority of vote of the select board and must be readopted annually at the organizational meeting and at other times as practicable. So this is the organizational meeting. So adopting this rule will meet that requirement. But then, in addition, I also circulated a more robust rules of procedure, of which we can talk about now in some degree, or what I think that it deserves a bit of discussion, and certainly comment from the public would be much appreciated. What the idea was in the enhanced version is to more specifically define some of the procedures that aren't really well spelled out in the past versions, and there's some questions of that. And Joe, if well, we can go there later. So what I would ask for would be first a motion to adopt the select board rules of procedure, which is designated as adopted today.
Josh,
And then we can have discussion if there are any.
Do you want a motion first and then discuss, or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Or we could it's either way, your choice.
Mr. Chair.
I'm going to make one quick suggestion that for those of you who are listening, the rules have a requirement that you adopt at a date certain, in fact, this meeting. And what we're about to do is amend the current rules so that we can move to the next meeting and consider these various proposals and adopt the remainder of the rules at that time. And that's what we're discussing. I would be inclined to want to see at other times as soon as practicable.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and my sense would be, if we're all agreed, to entertain a motion to adopt this draft as presented with changes in italics. If we're all agreed to
I'm
those.
happy to, yeah, I mean, put the motion forward, and then I have a question on one of them, so.
So, you want to call a motion?
Yes, we're entertaining a motion right now.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve the draft version of the Select Board Rules of Procedure, which is stated as adopted today, with the changes made that are currently in italics, with the addition of the edit by the chair on number 16.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there discussion? Joe, do you want to comment?
I just had one question. I'm
I-
sorry, Joe, to
sorry.
interrupt you, but on number 8, Josh, it looks like we're going from, what, 24 hours to 48, which seems fine, as long as
Okay.
Joe's good with that?
Yeah, this is the reason I
the-
changed it, this is
the
what's in the
VLCT?
open, this is in the open meetings law.
Okay.
In the past, it only had 24 hours, but under the open meeting law, it requires a 48-hour
Good.
notice.
And then the 2 other public places that I assume is posted, is that a hard copy posting of?
Yes, and that, we can discuss that now, but it is also something I put is discussing in the
Yeah, I just
the
wanted to make
future.
sure that
Because
staff's
that,
comfortable
again-
with
Yeah, it's fine. I mean,
posting
I didn't know if
requirement,
I
we
mean,
already
we
do that, or-
post here at the town offices, at the post office, and the library. I don't know
So
if
we're
we want
good.
to define
Yeah.
that or not. That was one comment I had. And then the other comment I had is for number 13, Josh. I think that it might be important to make sure it's clear that these are the draft minutes that need to be up in 5 calendar days.
Yes, and that's what it says in the, well, I was just using the language in the,
So,
Existing?
open meeting law.
so
And so it,
So just say
I would just, my recommended edit is on the
Say
second,
draft minutes?
second sentence. It could say after 5 calendar days from the date of each meeting, draft minutes shall be available for inspection.
so,
That's
So-
the point, because of course they're not minutes until they're approved, so. Is that acceptable to everybody to add that to the? Is there a second to Jamie's?
if you just.
Can we still have discussion on the
Yes.
changes?
On items that are
Yes.
proposed, intent.
On the first version.
So are you doing it piecemeal to each suggested change?
No, I thought I would make a brief introduction and talk about, just very quickly, the themes of the proposal, and then ask for each of us to comment so far.
Which proposal are you talking about?
The second,
I still have a question
the
on
larger
first.
one.
Right.
I still have a question on the
I'm
first.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Time for
May I
it
have the
right now.
floor?
Time for it right now.
Thank you. Paragraph 16, I'm not sure what is meant by the last clause that was added, and at other times as practicable. The question I have is, and you've added the phrase "as soon as practicable." The question I have is, does this mean that at any other time that the board feels it's necessary to amend the rules based on a majority vote, they would be amended? Or does it mean as soon as practicable after the first meeting? In other words, is this something that is up for amendment at any time by the select board on majority vote?
That
'Cause
would
if
be my
so,
yeah.
I think the language is confusing. If the select board can, at any time, based on a majority vote, amend the rules of procedure, it should happen right then and there. There's no as soon as practicable that needs to happen, it seems to me.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if you just put a period where the comma is and made a second sentence, these rules must be adopted annually. And then you'd have,
A second means for amending the rules as necessary upon a majority vote of the board.
that's my understanding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, they can be amended by,
Okay,
I mean, in
so,
principle, I
3
think we ought to
people.
be able to amend them at any
any
time
time.
by
Correctly,
majority vote.
Right.
so what,
Yeah.
could you give me the?
So- I'll try to do it, taking the lead from Jamie's cue, that period after organizational meeting.
Okay,
Okay, got it.
Is that what you meant? No, I think it
I
was.
think I meant
No.
the first,
Select board.
yeah.
Sorry.
These rules may be amended by
May be
majority vote
amended,
of the select
And
board.
then these rules must be adopted annually at the organizational meeting and at other times as soon as
oh,
practicable.
got you, yeah.
Or must
Right.
be readopted
Yeah.
annually
Yeah.
and may be amended at other times as practicable?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't even think you need that, as
Yeah.
can be amended at any time on majority vote of the board.
Right.
In which case, well, we have to have the annual adoption.
Yeah, that's in there.
Sure.
Yeah, got
These
you.
are really
Okay.
adopted annual and at the organizational meeting, and you had a phrase there. And any other time by a majority vote of the board?
These rules may be amended by majority vote of the board, period, of the select
Right.
board. They must be readopted annually.
At the organization.
What if we just said these rules may be amended by majority vote of the select board and at other times as practicable? And they must be adopted annually at the organizational meeting?
I don't like the phrase "as practicable" because it doesn't really have any meaning. I'm sorry to be a stick about this.
Oh, I don't know, Josh, was that was that
No,
in the
no,
open meeting law?
somebody gave me, I don't know where that word came from, but
I think what
It
you're
was
meaning to
suggested to
say is
me.
that we can amend the rules on majority vote at any time.
And we're
Right.
We're
And
loyal
the
to the-
second sentence is they need to be readopted after the
Annually.
organizational
Yeah.
meeting and thereafter, right? They can be,
at
as soon as
at
practicable.
any time.
If you don't get it done at the organizational meeting,
I think,
right?
So,
Is
but that's my
the idea?
question. I don't
They
think
have to
that's
be
the
readopted
idea.
then.
The idea is every year, organizational meeting, we're going to readopt the rules. But at any point in time, on a majority vote, the rules may be amended.
Right, so we should just cross out at all times practicable and just make two sentences.
Correct.
These rules may be amended by a majority vote of the select board. They must be period, and they must be readopted annually at the organizational meeting.
Perfect.
Done.
Yeah.
but that doesn't allow for it being modified after that.
Yes,
Well,
it does.
Yes,
The
it
first
does.
sentence
First
addresses
sentence
that,
says they
right?
can be amended by majority vote at
Okay.
any time, but they
Okay.
must be adopted annually.
Gotcha.
Well, in
All
fact,
right.
after the word select board, you can say at any time, period.
Yeah.
And then they
Okay.
must be readopted annually at the organizational
Okay.
meeting.
Would that help,
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary, to put at any time?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and these are to be at the organizational meeting, and I get rid of the last one. Great,
So why
cool.
don't we read that through for Mary Ann's sake, just so
Okay.
they get it right?
It would now read, these rules may be amended by majority vote of the select board at any time, period. These rules must be adopted annually at the organizational meeting, period.
Readopted.
Readopted, isn't that what, okay, sorry.
You get one more chance to read that correctly.
Okay, would you like me to try it again?
No,
Thank you, I apologize for being difficult.
no, thank you, Mary.
No, I think it's
Excellent
much,
point.
it's very clear now.
Excellent point, yeah. Is there any other discussion on the first step tonight, which is to adopt the existing as amended?
Oh, and
Jamie?
the other question in response to Joe's item, it in the open meeting law, it does say just the minutes shall be available for inspection after 5 calendar days. So I guess it would be up to the select board to decide to make a change. I don't know if that is a relevant legal change or not.
Shall we consider that in the proposal
Yeah.
next time?
Sure.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion?
Okay, so are we including draft minutes? I mean, if we're trying to be
Well, I think-
specific.
Yes,
then-
I think draft minutes, we should,
Okay.
because they are, that's what they are until they're approved.
All right.
Everybody okay? Will those approve signify by saying aye,
Aye.
and those opposed, nay. Motion carries. I'd like to make just a few quick comments about, for us and for all of us. One of the things the proposed rules tries to do is to make improved use of the resources, not only around this table, but in the community. And one of a series of ideas contained in the proposal, which will be discussed, at, I'm sure, further length next meeting, is to turn to one or two of us at various points in time to ask that they take the lead in addressing issues or topics or problems which capitalize on their skills and which in effect decentralizes the decision-making of the board. There's an example that I can give you quickly, which will kind of clue you in. We're not intending to spend a great deal of time tonight on the detail, but one of the several proposals relates to appointment of new members to boards, commissions, and committees, and specifically provides for the direct involvement of those boards, commissions, and committees in that process, to the point of actually making recommendations. That whole process, as a proposed policy, it seems to me will benefit on our parts from Josh and Mary's direct experience as board and commission members and chairs. They've seen it from their side. There have been occasions, as you know, where people were quite surprised who were chairing committees to find out that the meeting they were attending that night also had an appointment of a member to it. So it's difficult with some of the timing. It's difficult sometimes with organizing. It's an extra burden on the town manager. But that's an example in one gulp of what we're proposing generally and trying to do. Make better use of the skills we've got. The availability, some of us are available at some times, others not, and that's one of the themes. The other theme is to seek and actively consider public input. And so you'll see if you study this proposal, those are really two of the things that occur and reoccur in it. I think our task tonight is to identify some things that we either simply don't understand or we want to highlight in some way for all of us to be thinking about. And we're committed to the next meeting to discuss this in detail and possibly adopt, if not a meeting further from there, so that we're sure it's right.
Is the chairman open to suggestions as to how to handle the proposed undated amended set of the rules, Josh's proposal?
Undated.
Undated. I mean, there's a long set of proposed rules that Josh has put forward. Mm-hmm. They're involved, lengthy.
Yeah.
And I don't think it lends itself to a board discussion in this format when we have an agenda that's 19 issues long.
Yep.
So I would like to propose, if it's not inappropriate, Mr. Chairman, that we take up the matter of these rules at some sort of retreat where the matter can be discussed in a dialogue sort of way with back and forth and rewriting. It took us several minutes just to do that one clause, which was great because the more minds you have, the better result you get, I believe. But I do think it's something that might warrant a lengthy discussion at a retreat or some similar meeting where we don't have a long agenda.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because in effect there are our guidance. There are our own guidance that we rewrite ourselves.
And we have a set now,
Yeah.
we just adopted, so they
Yeah,
should get
and
us
we're
through
okay.
some.
And they could in fact structure some of the retreat. I mean, they introduce issues that no doubt we'll be discussing.
I mean, the only downside to that is if we don't have folks in the room
Well, they'd
who
be
are,
invited to
well,
the
maybe
retreat.
they will be, which is great. I'm just,
Yeah.
And what I hope, I think it's a reasonable thing, is that these will be available for people to look at and make comments on. And I think that would be
Yeah.
really worthwhile.
That seems to me
Yeah,
very
that works.
workable. Yeah, yeah. Joe, you want to comment?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Where, if that's the case, where would they be posted so they could be,
I'll find a spot on the website that's clear.
okay?
I think some themes will be less controversial than others, is what I would say, right? I think it's pretty clear that the board input with CBCs, I think everybody would generally get behind that and endorse
Yeah.
that, right? Some of the others maybe will
Some of the
merit
exceptions.
a lengthier conversation.
Well, I think also
Just at
this,
first blush, I haven't
the
spent a ton
rules
of
that we
time on
have
it.
for this, for the boards should also be incorporated in the rules of procedure, I think. There is a provision that Josh put in that says we will do so, but I think it would probably be appropriate to have that procedure embedded. And so that we would talk about, I think that, maybe Jamie, I'm just
Yeah.
repeating what you just said.
No,
I'm
no,
not
no,
sure.
that's good. That works for me. You good with
All
it?
agreed?
It's going to be a
So-
busy retreat.
Yes.
So, Joe, the guidance for you is that we'll take this up in, I think retreat makes the most sense of all. That's a later item in terms of the schedule.
Yep.
And please do, Dr. Mertz.
I tried.
I won my bet early on.
What's the bet?
You were going to be the first, I wouldn't have bet against you.
Dr. Metz bet me that he wasn't going to say anything all meeting long. I took the bet. I took the bet.
Did you bet a
Failed.
couple?
You failed. We haven't even got to agenda item 3.
And I presume that you're soliciting comments to these rules so that they'll be widely available. Online sounds good even to me.
Yeah.
And you're soliciting before this retreat happens.
Yeah.
You're soliciting comments from the public on this.
Absolutely, yeah.
And as Jerry said, we hope that that will be the procedure for almost anything that comes before the board. That if something is either to be introduced or revised, then there will be a significant, at least between a meeting for the public to review the document and be able to comment.
Are there any other comments? I think, Joe, are you comfortable with the guidance, and are we all
Yep.
set on this? Thank you, Maria, I think that was an excellent point. Next item is to adopt local emergency operation plan, abbreviated as LEOP, and I'd ask the town manager to explain that.
We do this every year. We'll have to kick that to the next meeting. The emergency management director, myself, the fire chief, and police chief did meet on this Friday evening. We came up with some updates, mostly minor in nature, things like we need to make sure that we show that we have a quint now. So we're in the process of updating that and hope to have it before you at the next meeting. So we can wait.
Questions, anybody? If not, the next item is to confirm select board regular meeting dates, times, and locations.
And just following the charter here, it says that as soon as possible after the election of the chair and the vice chair, the board shall fix the time and place of its regular meetings. So here we are. Typically, you've met the second and fourth Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. here at the town offices. I'm assuming you want to continue doing that, but according to the charter, you need to make that clear.
Do we need to have an official motion or just a sense of the
Can't
board?
hurt.
Okay.
All right, do I hear one?
So move to confirm that we will hold select board meetings on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month here at, what is this, meeting room number 1
One, yeah,
in the town offices
at 7 p.m.
at 7 p.m.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? I'll make one quick point that I think it would be useful and beneficial if at points in time we met at other venues, specifically Wake Robin and potentially others, to maximize attendance and participation by folks who either can't conveniently get here or are best involved as a large group. The downside, of course, to that suggestion is that it's not taped. So we would have to,
I think they're able to tape it. They can't live stream, is my
Yeah.
understanding. Is that right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
so we'd have to have at the time some discussion, but if all of us feel that this motion and statement would not permit that, I'd be willing to amend it so that we could at least consider other venues.
And
The
that is,
motion, I'm sorry, I think the motion's fine. I mean, you're talking about the regular meetings.
Okay.
Nothing's going to prevent you from having a special meeting or do something.
Even if it were at a regular
I
time.
don't think that there's anything there to
Happily.
that is a
that
problem.
is- that is described in the revised version and draft version of the rules.
Yep. With that, is there any discussion?
Just a couple, like, as far as holding a regular meeting with this type of agenda at a special location, I don't know if I see as much utility to that. It just makes it more challenging for people who have a diverse interest in maybe interest in one agenda item. Make it a little bit more difficult for them to get to a meeting. But as far as having like a special meeting, I'm not opposed to that, and we've discussed it before, and we've discussed it at previous retreats, especially if it's something that specifically affects that location. And Wake Robin gets brought up as an example often, but they're not the only, type population that we could visit.
It would be wonderful to meet the school. I think that would be, even jointly with the school board, I think would be terrific. So, good point. I'm completely okay as long as this doesn't rule it out. And then we'd have opportunity when it came to talk about the wisdom and the logistics. Any other comment? Chris, do you want to?
Chris Boyd, Thomas Road. So the only thing I would ask is that you make sure, like with Wake Robin, for example, it's a facility that has limited access. And that for a meeting like that, the public's still going to be able to come up, and it's not just exclusively for the Wake Robin residents.
Yeah.
That's correct.
No, it would be a meeting in every form except for venue.
Yeah.
And we'd have to talk through very carefully how the venue affected the meeting and whether that was in the end in the community interest.
They have
Absolutely.
space constraints there as well,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Yeah.
65, 70
Not the
people
least
max would be-
parking, yeah, for sure. No further discussion. The motion's been made and seconded. Would you signify approval by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And disapproval by saying no? Nay? Motion passes.
Did he?
Wait, did you vote
say
nay, or did you?
No.
He's saying signify
Got
by
it.
saying nay.
I'm just
what I thought,
keeping
the same
people
thing.
on their
Five and-
toes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Make sure you're listening carefully. Oh, boy. The next item is to consider approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda for March 13th, 2018 of the Shelburne Select Board.
I have a. Oh, should I wait till it's seconded?
Yeah.
A second? Did you second?
I didn't, but I could.
Second.
There's a second. Discussion.
So obviously, agenda item 5, that's a typo. It should say continued at agenda item 16. I think everyone figured that out. And then I did get a public records request from Shelburne News today. I released all but one document. The one document that I did not release was a correspondence from the town attorney to the then select board on February 15th, 2018. I don't believe that that's my document to release. I believe it would be appropriate for the select board to review that document and make its own determination of whether or not it's going to release the document. So that would be appropriate for executive session.
I would suggest having a review the document that I don't think, and I think I would like to suggest that we try not to have executive sessions, and I think after review of that document, I think that's something that can be discussed publicly, and I would suggest that it be put on the regular agenda.
I would prefer to discuss it in executive session and at least have an initial conversation about the nature of the communication and before making the entire document public.
Well, I think everyone here has read the document. So do you have specific concerns about what would be made, what would or would not be made public? That's the question
I have concerns to the extent that it's an attorney-client communication that may be deemed work product, so I wanted to have a conversation with the group to make sure that everybody was comfortable with disclosure.
So, and Josh, I agree with you. Like, looking at the email, I don't see anything that's particularly troublesome, but I'm not an attorney, and so I did want to have at least a discussion of exactly what liability that exposes the town to. I don't think there's anything particularly groundbreaking or secret of any of the what was involved in the email, but I do think it's worth at least hearing if the attorney had an opinion on it. So I prefer to at least discuss it initially in executive session. But otherwise, I agree with you. I think we should probably limit them, but this is an ongoing issue.
And sorry, then you could add an agenda item after executive session to consider a motion relative to that.
Yeah, to pair it up. Mary, you got an
Any
opinion?
other legal opinion?
I read the documentation. I don't think it's privileged in any way, nor do I think it's work product in any way. It's a conversation between two counsel. It's not privileged. Two opposing counsel. Therefore, I don't think it's privileged. That's my opinion.
And
Both-
I'm not taking an opinion on the matter,
Yeah.
except for I didn't believe it was my record to release, and so I think it was the select board's document
I
to
think
release.
you're absolutely correct about that.
Yeah, I agree.
And in fairness, if folks are uncomfortable and they want to have a sense of whether, I don't expect anyone at this table to rely on my opinion, and I'll say this many times, and you'll get bored. I'm a divorce attorney. I'm not a municipal attorney by any stretch of the imagination, but I read the documents. I don't think they're privileged. On the other hand, if folks are uncomfortable because they're fearful that release of the information would be a waiver of some sort, I can certainly understand that, particularly in this case where there was, as I understand it, a confidentiality agreement signed by the parties. So that being the case, I would be concerned, had I been involved at the time, that there would be a risk of violating that confidentiality agreement that was signed by the parties in connection with the matter being discussed. But once that happens, and since I wasn't privy to that, I can't comment. I do feel that that discussion is not necessarily privileged in that sense. But I can understand the concern, given that there was litigation and a confidentiality agreement was signed.
Yeah, and I do have a specific question that I don't feel comfortable asking in public.
Mr. Chair, do you have a view?
Yes, I have a view. This is a problem. Not least because the contents of that communication have been discussed by numbers of us in the sense that it was resulted from an assignment to me to speak with an individual and report back to the board. And all of that, much of that content was virtually what we discussed. So I'm in a very unusual position tonight, maybe the first of many, maybe the last of few, where I'm sort of subject to this. So I can understand all points of view other than the fact that I was surprised to see this as an issue. I'm going to go with I'm going to make an error on the conservative side and agree to executive session. Again, not the least because I'd love to know what I did or didn't do. And in that case, that's where I'm going to come out. Is there a motion?
So we'll amend
To
the
amend the-
agenda to include an executive session.
And a possible decision item, and a decision item after executive session.
Correct.
Whereabouts on the agenda
and
do you want to
certainly
do that?
we'd have to.
After
and-
18.
I mean, I would just bring up, given the rules for entering executive session, it may be,
We'd have to decide.
yeah, and it may be hard to
To arrive at one.
arrive at that conclusion, but.
I don't disagree with you on that, Josh.
Can you provide one? Are you, I mean, you, in the
Off the
motion,
top
do
of
we
my
need-
head for
No,
what
no,
the
but in the
exception to
motion-
the,
Do we need to refer to statute in the motion?
Oh, no, I mean, one of the items that is acceptable is attorney-client communication, so I don't have
yeah, I
any
don't
problem
know
with
the
that.
statutory
I think
reference.
you have so I think it's pretty clear.
All right.
So you'll do an 18A executive session and then an 18B decision on the document.
I'm lost.
So it's going to be,
Executive session will be 18A.
Well,
Are
I
you
mean, we
talking
have to have-
about
we have to have a
today's
vote on
agenda?
this.
Yeah, we haven't voted.
yeah, so it's
on it.
actually a motion, isn't it like pursuant to 1 VSA 313 to go into executive session and invite the town manager? to attend to discuss the town of Shelburne.
You're not going to do that right now, right?
Right, but that's like the word verbiage.
yeah.
And
So
that'll
you're going to do
be-
executive session.
That'll be 18A.
18A, and then 18B, you're going to add a decision item about whether or not to release the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a motion, Colleen? Will that-
Well, it was a motion,
it was
do,
already-
should we, because that was a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Correct.
Do we want to vote on that? And then have another motion is approve the agenda as amended?
I would
And I
think-
have another amendment. I have another, something else. I'd
Well,
like
let's
to
hear
change
all the
at end.
amendments, and then we'll,
Okay. What I would like to make a motion to move items 16 and 17, which are the public, actually 17 and 18, which is the select board comments and the town manager's report. I would make a motion to move those back to the traditional beginning of the agenda after item 3. I think the public benefits by hearing that information earlier than later.
I'll second that.
is there any discussion to that
No
idea?
objections from me.
I don't think that'll be too confusing. That's the norm.
So we really just have one public comment period, right?
Yes. correct.
Yes, I would certainly favor that.
Well,
Would everybody, one
if I
can,
understood Josh's motion, it was to move 17 and 18, the select board comments and the town manager's report.
Right, and then the public comments that already exist as
Right,
number
I
5.
understand that, but
so 16, 17, and 18 would move as a group ahead of 3, and we'd renumber accordingly.
ahead of 3?
And then the
No,
executive session's
it would be-
9.
it would be
It's
after 3.
5,
Yeah.
5 and then 5A.
Sorry, 5, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. You're right.
Thank you.
Correct. Sorry,
All
I
right.
said the wrong place.
And I guess as far as discussion goes, like, that's how it's always been done, you know, obviously the last 6 months. It just affected workflow and when other people who were here for a specific agenda item and when we were able to stay on task. But it's a new select board and a new year. And so, you know, I guess the only thing to just keep in mind is if the public comments do go longer than like a specific amount of time, would the rest of the board be willing to then stop them at some point and continue them at a later point, just to make sure that the meeting moves along, so that people who come in for agenda number 10 can know when to be here?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the chair's job, right? If it's running
No.
overtime, then we can just defer
No, I agree
public
that
comment.
we've had some circumstances where people said hours and made prior arrangements, and finally some had to leave, which was really discouraging. I mean, they came and were on time and had to leave, so.
And that may be a request that we, or a question that we ask to the audience is if there are time constraints that.
I think we can consider a motion as to accept the agenda as amended. Is that agreeable to everybody? Right here and now?
Yep, I'll second that if that's a motion.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, will everybody signify approval by aye
Aye.
and disapproval by nay? Thank you. So our next item will be consider approving the Select Board minutes of February 27, 2018. Is there a motion to that effect?
I so moved.
A second?
Second. Oh,
Thank
Okay.
you. Any discussion, any changes? Will those approving signify by saying aye?
aye.
Aye. And those disapproving, nay?
I abstain.
Nay.
I abstained as well. I
And
wasn't there.
And Mary and Jamie abstain for reason of not being present.
I was present. Just so everybody knows.
All right, now we're going to,
Right here.
You just have to initial those, Jerry.
okay, you want to take the lead now on what
Wait,
the
wait,
next
wait.
item is going to be, and
What's the-
according to your,
Or-
Oh, the, consider reappointments?
Public
No,
comment.
it's
Public
public
Oh,
comments.
public comments. Oh, yes, I forgot that. Sorry. Are there any public comments so far?
Sean Moran, Sean, just to start on the correct foot. Since I guess I'm the vice big mouth, you would be the chair big mouth, so we'll go from there. Thank you, Colleen, for your nomination. Thank the new board for sitting in. I have a feeling these comments are going to become rather undramatic from the last year, which is good. I want to thank you all for being here, for running clean elections. And Jerry, I love your shirt until I heard executive committee, so I'm going to keep my shirt hater nominator for a while. Just a joke there.
You need to be careful because there are a number of us at this moment who are about to make a resolution later tonight that March 17th be designated Shelburne St. Patrick's Day. Not just St. Patrick's Day, but Shelburne St. Patrick's Day. And we were going to invite you, but I don't know.
Those are the breaks.
Are there any other comments? Any other? Hearing none? Comments from the board itself?
I also would like to make a comment, being the new kid on the block. I'd like to express to the board that I'm looking forward to serving. I'm looking forward to working with everybody on the board collaboratively. And I want to thank everybody who supported me in my bid to get this seat, many of whom are in the audience this evening. I think we're very lucky to have a town with such wonderful people in it and people who are willing to work hard for a common goal, which is to make sure that Shelburne remains a vibrant and wonderful place to live. Thank you.
If I can, I would like to read something that sometimes is difficult. So, I would like to pay tribute tonight to a woman who had been very, who had very much liked to be sitting in the audience viewing this select board. Dorothy Sawyer, who passed away last week, was a small business owner and a Shelburne resident for almost 60 years, with a clear, focused grasp of its culture. Dorothy was an assertive champion for inclusive government who believed that the decision should be made in the best interest of the people. Since the beginning of my tenure, I was the fortunate recipient of numerous email messages that reflected her perspectives in an eclectic, expansive, humorous, and uncensored style. But the chuckles that they elicited never overshadowed the seriousness of her mission to advocate for the issues that she felt would improve the well-being of Shelburne residents. Although serving on the Select Board has had its challenges for me over the past 2 years, I recognize that as this 84-year-old woman, who still worked a 40-hour week, had the energy and conviction to lend her support to me and to others addressing town problems, then I could do no less. I hope to be able to continue to honor her legacy of community commitment as Shelburne moves on from this point. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Colleen, any comment?
Just welcome, Mary.
Jamie?
I'm excited to serve. I'm excited to work with everybody on the board. I think we're going to have a good year ahead of us. I have a good sense and a good vibe that we're going to get a lot done, be very productive, and collaborate well. So thank you, everybody in the room. Even if you didn't support me, I know we've had some really good conversations, so I look forward to more. Thank you.
I as well wish to thank everybody for their support and interest. I urge you to continue to join in with us as we take on a series of important issues and challenges. Those are not going to wait long for us. I think this tonight is an opportunity for us to kind of get our legs under us and get a little used to working with each other. We have a powerhouse group here of experience, skills, and dedication, and I'm sure that's going to be applied in very satisfying measure to what we take on in the near future and the rest of the year. But thank you for coming, and we value your participation. We will seek it all the time. And again, to those who were confident enough to reelect me, I thank you. Any other comments? The next item is to consider reappointments. Oh, Joe, you want to?
All good. I'm good.
Joe's good.
Thank you.
Next item is consider reappointments to commissions, boards, and committees. By way of brief introduction, these reappointments are those that responded to Joe's question about whether each individual was interested in being reappointed in the affirmative. There is under consideration, under proposed rules, a very definite process of initial appointments to committees, boards, and commissions, but these are reappointments. And tonight we're going to be presented a proposal to reappoint those that responded to Joe. So there will be some that have not yet or not had the opportunity, and we'll have to revisit that at future meetings.
Okay. Again, according to the Shelburne Charter, appointed terms commence on April 1st. So it's ideal if those who are serving on our CBCs, I send out an email to everyone and ask those who have terms coming up if they want to be reappointed to let me know. And if the board, decides to reappoint them, it makes it a little bit simpler to advertise publicly the open seats that then folks can apply for. So that's how we've done things, at least in the past. Certainly this board can do as it sees fit. I put in your packet a document with all of the committee members, and I have signaled, I think for the most part, those who have responded with terms expiring at the end of this month, if they would like to be reappointed. So we could go by committee if you wanted to make a motion, or if, I guess I'm not sure how this board is going to handle these reappointments.
Can I make a suggestion? And this comes from one of the items that are in the review that we would consider at the retreat, is the idea of vesting a lot of this authority within the committee. So I would suggest that instead of approving this now, since this has to be done by April 1st, that we asked the heads of the committees if they, for their confirmation of these reappointments. I mean, it's just another step.
I think in all cases, this has come, actually my email goes out to the chairs or the point person that I have corresponded with from every CBC, and then they,
So the chairs have,
the chairs have been involved,
Okay.
up to this point.
That's fine.
This is consistent with the proposed policy.
Yeah, okay.
My sense, Joe, would be to perhaps read the reappointments and then approve as a body, rather than going committee by commission by board. Is that agreeable with all of us?
I would recommend doing one by one, because I think since I handed that packet out on Friday, I've received updated information.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't want to,
No.
even up till just this
Okay.
evening. So the first one on your packet is stapled are the planning commissioners. So Perry unfortunately has resigned, but his term ends later, so we'll advertise for that one anyways. The two positions that end on 2018, and they've both indicated that they would like to be reappointed, are Andrew Everett and Asim Zia. So I don't know if you want to make a motion to reappoint those two.
I'm happy to make these as my former commission. I move to appoint Andrew Everett and Asim Zia to a term beginning April 1, 2018 and ending March 31, 2021.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Those who are approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. It carries unanimously. DRB, Mary? Oh, sorry, Joe.
So I'm guessing Mary's not seeking reappointment, so makes that one a little easier. So there'll certainly be at least one opening on the DRB immediately, actually. The two alternates, Norm and Jeff, would like to be reappointed. The third alternate, Alex, does not. So there could be a motion to reappoint, if the board would like to reappoint the two alternates, Norm and Jeff. And the alternate positions are one-year terms.
And I would move to reappoint both of them. They're both outstanding members of the community and have served the DRB well. So Jeff is an architect and Norm is a lawyer, and those are good skills for the DRB.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? If not, will those approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those disapproving, nay. Carries unanimously.
Okay. The three members of the Recreation Commission, Kathleen Pudvar, Bruce Whitbeck, and Renee Davitt, have all indicated that they would like to serve for another 3 years.
So move to approve all three for a term starting or continuing through March 31st, 2021.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? If not, those approving signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. It's unanimous.
Okay.
The next is the Water Commission.
Okay, so two separate issues here. Steve Smith would like to be reappointed to a term till 2021, and I would like to indicate that Mike Abrams has moved from Shelburne to Burlington. However, he would like to continue the last of his one-year term. I can just say from my own experience, since I staff the Water Commission, that Mike shows up and he's a strong contributor to the group. So the motion, I suppose, would be to reappoint Steve Smith if the Select Board is willing for another 3-year term.
No residency required.
Yeah, that's,
There's not in the charter. Nope. There's not one. The only board that has that is Select Board,
I was going to say, not even DRB.
not even the DRB.
Yeah.
We have a cemetery commissioner in Heinsberg
Dorothy is
and
on the historic.
Dorothy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll move to reappoint Steve Smith to a term that expires in 2020. And also Mike Abrams to continue out his remaining year, if that's okay to make a twin motion.
2020 or 2021? 21.
Second is
21.
21.
Thank you, Colleen. I'll amend the motion accordingly.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, will those approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. Unanimous.
Okay. Both Ruth Hagerman, the chair of the trustees, and Kathy Townsend have indicated they would like to be reappointed to the Library Board of Trustees for another 3 years.
Okay, move to appoint both to a term through March 31st, 2021.
Second?
Any discussion? If not, those approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Okay. Ron Gagnon and the Cemetery Commission said he's okay with being reappointed for another 3-year go at that one.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Colleen, seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Hearing none, will those signify approval by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye, and disapproval, nay. Carries unanimously.
Okay, I think instead of 50%, Dorothea is 100% now, and Mark Vincent is also willing to do another 3-year term of the Historic Preservation Design Review Committee.
Move to appoint Dorothea Pinar and Mark Vincent to the Historic Preservation and Design Review Commission for a term beginning April 1, 2018 and ending March 31, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, those who are approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those disapproving, nay. No nays, it carries unanimously.
All right, and we're up to tree advisory. The chair, Gail Henderson King, and also David Hall, who is your tree warden as well. Both would like to be reappointed for a 3-year term on the tree advisory committee.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those disapproving, say nay. The ayes have it.
Okay, just to note, your Stormwater Advisory Committee, they have an undefined term. I think they will cease existence once they hand over a draft ordinance to the Select Board, hopefully later this year, for your public hearings. So I don't think there's any need to reaffirm that they're on the committee, but they're on that committee. All right, we're at Natural Resources and Conservation Committee. The chair, Gail Albert, indeed wants to do another 3 years, and Don Rindle would also like to do another 3 years.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those disapproving, nay. The ayes have it.
All right, so Bike and Ped Committee, I've only heard back so far from Kevin. Typically, you sign up people even if you don't hear back from them, but in this case, we should give Chris and Rocco an opportunity. I just haven't had a chance to connect with them, but you can reappoint Kevin tonight if you would like.
Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Josh moves.
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any discussion? If not, will those approving signify by saying aye? Aye. And those disapproving, nay. It's unanimous. It might be a question to ask here, if nobody minds. The student memberships, we determine on their own
Right.
at another time.
Separate
So that
process.
if there was any question, a number of these committees have student members. It's an initiative that we'll certainly want to continue.
Thank you. Good point. Thanks. So, see, Social Service Committee is all set. Ethics Committee, Pete Gadju has indicated he would like to be reappointed for another year as the alternate. The alternate's a 1-year rollover. And the chair and vice chair at this point have indicated that they're unsure. So I think that you can reappoint Pete at this point.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Will they be able to function with
I mean, we can.
that number?
Well, their term, the charter says, so their term is through the end of the month, and then it also says, appointed term shall commence April 1st or as soon thereafter as successor is appointed. So there is a little bit of flexibility. I think that the Ethics Committee has a meeting later this month, and that they're going to talk about that.
Okay, thank you, George.
And we
Yep.
could also revisit this at the next Select Board meeting.
Oh,
I was
absolutely.
just concerned about a meeting
Absolutely.
between now and then, so.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there a motion to the effect of appointing
Yeah, I
Pete
moved.
Gadget? By Colleen,
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? If not, will those approving signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And those disapproving, nay.
All right, the veterans, I still need to just talk to Sam, so let's move past those for at least tonight. And then John Zacconi has indicated he would like, these are 2-year terms, not 3-year terms, to the Regional Planning Commission. John Zacconi would like to be reappointed, and George Chavone as the alternate. They both indicated to me that they would like to be reappointed to that commission.
So moved.
Moved by Colleen,
I just have a question.
seconded by Jamie.
I'm
Discussion.
sorry, I thought you already did that. With these, and I guess these other appointments, I remember that we, and this may be out of line here, but I'll ask it anyhow, and you can tell me to shut up. All of the committees sort of come and offer a report, but I'm not sure we've actually had a report from Have we?
CCRPC.
Yeah.
Yeah, they usually come in like April or May to do an annual report.
All right, I just,
Yep.
yeah, that'd be good.
So, sorry to, Colleen made the motion.
I moved already, and Jamie already seconded.
Seconded.
Okay.
Any further discussion? If not, will those approving signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye, and disapproving nay? Ayes have it.
Okay, our CTA, which is GMT now, those are good for now. Same with Solid Waste District, those have another year to go. All right, then the Village Dog Park Committee, Erica would like to be reappointed, and Bill has indicated he will not be seeking reappointment, so there will be an opening there, but Erica could be reappointed by this board for another 3 years.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mary and seconded by Colleen. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Will those of you who approve signify by saying aye? Aye. Aye, and those disapproving nay? And the ayes have it.
All right,
That's it.
that felt like a lot of work, but good job.
Thank you. Are there any? Yes?
You're done with that, right? Hi, Tracy Bowden, excuse me. Wasn't agenda item 18, town manager's report moved to after select board comments?
Yes. And it was brief.
Oh, there wasn't one? Okay.
Yeah, you didn't miss it.
I couldn't think of anything good to say, so.
You didn't miss
Yeah.
it, Tracy. That's-
And certainly, I think it's good to thank everyone who wanted to re-up for another 3 years. It's a big commitment, and Shelburne's fortunate that almost all of our spots are filled, and there'll be a few openings that we'll be advertising publicly for. So hopefully, we'll have some competition for those.
Hi, Sue.
McClellan, Falls Road. Did I misunderstand you, Joe, when you said people on these boards don't have to live in Shelburne except for the select board?
You didn't misunderstand that.
So someone from Charlotte can come and be on our recreation committee or different?
Yeah, there's a woman that's lives in Heinsberg that's was appointed to the cemetery commission. She had an expertise, if you recall. It's not a requirement by the charter, so.
I just wasn't sure if I heard you correctly. Thank
Do you
you.
have any thoughts on that, Susan? Is that?
Yes,
Let's hear it.
I do.
Let's hear it.
That's a good
Yeah,
thing.
let's see.
I would hope that there are other people within our Shelburne community that also have the expertise to fill these positions. So I don't know if that would require a change in the charter or what, but
That's a good point. We'll follow up on that and we'll let
Okay.
you know.
thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Dorothy Pinar is another who when she moved, she retained her position on the historic and design, and that's a good point. Thank you. Any other comments? The next item on the agenda is to consider approving a donation from the Select Board Discretionary Fund to the Lenny Bissonette Scholarship Fund. Would any member like to start off, or should we ask for public comment at the start?
Well, I think probably you need to explain what the.
I don't know what it is.
The explanation here lodges mainly with a statement I made at annual town meeting, which was that we would propose at our next board meeting tonight a recognition of the former chairman's service by donating funds to the Bissonette Scholarship Fund, which awards to deserving youngsters in softball and baseball scholarship monies. That fund is administered by the town. Peter would be prepared to describe it for you and to indicate what its current balance is. This recognition does not involve a change in name of any fund or the introduction of a named fund. It's a recognition for a service that was rendered this town, and I would think it useful for us to consider it in these terms. Is it a precedent that's well to establish? If it is a precedent, and could it be continued, or should it be? The form of the donation itself, which would be budgeted monies to the select board to be used at their discretion. And I would urge finally that in our discussion, we separate out the person from the process. I think it's pretty useful to describe the process which might apply someday to anybody serving the town, so that we don't run astray of feelings we may have pro or con that might just simply compromise the main discussion. My point of view is this, which I will offer. This is for some of us, maybe most of us, a period of time called March Madness. For those of you who either love it or try to avoid it, you'll see night after night, some of you on very large screens, Joseph's coat of team colors running up and down in a variety of venues all over this country. But the one thing you will see that's common to all of it is that after each game, they line up and shake hands. I think there's great merit in that practice. However hard the fight, however ugly the conversation that never gets through the TV that you don't hear, you shake hands. And to me, this proposal, as I introduced it at town meeting, is a recognition in the form of a shaken hand. But now we'll entertain discussion from, what's your pleasure? To listen to the audience first, or anybody who would like to speak to it? We're interested to hear from you.
Sean Moran. It's a two-part question. Well, a one-part question, one-part comment. Where does the discretionary fund come from? You know, we talk about other committees not even be able to get money for some of the needs they need, and all of a sudden we have a board with a discretionary fund. Secondly, to use your analogy in March Madness, both teams, both sides shake hands. That courtesy was never extended by the other side. To be honest and to be fair, you can't have Villanova shaking Kansas's hand when Kansas sits there and glowers at Villanova. I'm just giving you back your analogy to be honest and fair. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sean. Joe, do you want to?
The discretionary fund's been, I don't know how long it's been in the budget, but it's 8,000 or so that is there. We use it sometimes for conferences for the board, or I'm not, Peter might be able to give you a better idea of kind of historically where that money has gone. I don't think you've used any of it this year, or probably 40 or 50 bucks up till now. It's important to note that the BISNet fund, I believe, is about $700 right now. It is heavily used during the year. There's kids that need the scholarship funds in order to play the sports. And it is kind of becoming, it could use some replenishing from one form or another.
I'd like to know, well, I guess I'll offer this comment. I feel that it's a very laudable idea to recognize the former chair of the board, but I feel it should be done with private funds, and I feel it can easily be done with private funds, as many of us do. And the board could organize that, or a group of citizens can organize that. The reason I suggest that is, for me, I'm not as familiar with Gary Von Stange's service for the 9 years in the town, because I've not been here that long. I've been here for 5. I also think it's a slippery slope when the board starts using its money for funds to recognize and celebrate a public official, because these are town funds. So so I would prefer that we organize a committee or a group to make a donation and raise some funds, and it could be a very, significant amount of funds, because the idea of having this scholarship fund is wonderful. It should be in someone's name, and I understand from a conversation that I had earlier today with Colleen Parker that Gary Von Stange was a coach, a baseball coach, and a baseball person. I don't know if he was a fanatic, but
He was a fanatic.
so I think it is a wonderful idea, but it should be done privately and not publicly.
Colleen, you want to speak to the?
Jerry, I thought that your idea to do this was a very gentlemanly thing to come up with, and I understand that this is a heated subject for people in the room, and okay, and it's an understatement, but it's still like he's a volunteer, and he did put forth like not just 9 years on the board, and whether you were a friend or a foe, or a friend then a foe, he did give a lot to the town, and he believed in what he was doing. If this was just a gift certificate for him to go to dinner, then I would feel a little bit squeamish about it, but the fact that it's giving to the town and to the children in the town in a meaningful way, it means something to him, sure, but it will mean even more to the children that are able to play baseball because of it. That's how I met him. Was he coached my son, and I would still stand by it. I thought it was a really notable thing for you to offer as an idea to do. If others feel strongly against it, then I'm still willing to contribute a financial contribution to it. I know that, and as a board member, he also would, and I said this during town meeting, he would sell things and then donate it to like the food shelf, or donate the proceeds to the food shelf. And he gave a lot of his own personal finances as contributions. But that being said, I mean, like if people feel like it's a dangerous precedent, then
Sure. I would like to echo a lot of Mary's comments. I mean, and truly to separate the process from the person, because I think that is the appropriate thing to do here. And this, and I think public service is obviously a good thing, either as a paid employee or as a volunteer. And we've been fortunate to have lots of community members spend many, many years working as volunteers on different committees. We've had select board members that have spent 12, 15 years. And so even though I don't like the slippery slope terminology necessarily, I think it is, as Jerry said, this precedent-setting thing. And it does concern me that anytime someone on the select board thinks that somebody should get an award, we should get an award. So on one hand, I think if these kinds of things are a desirable thing for the town to do, then we should have a policy about how we create these kinds of things. And that would be a way of moving forward. Secondly, I also agree that using public funds for this is, again, not a good idea. Especially if we've already gone through this budget process, and there's been lots of concerns about budget, and there's been lots of concerns about what isn't getting done. even though I think the idea of contributing to a Little Chief scholarship is great, I think, as has been stated, the idea of organizing a group or individuals so inclined to make contributions to that fund, but and I'm all for having a motion by the select board to encourage people to do that. But to take public funds for this purpose, I think is ill-advised.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I forgot the question I wanted to ask earlier. How much are we talking about as a contribution to this fund? I don't think that's been identified.
No, it hasn't. That's been left to our discussion.
Oh, okay.
No, that was fairly deliberate on my part at town meeting. We did not mention a figure. The balance, the current balance is approximately $800 that's in the fund, correct?
8,000?
And just to clarify, this is a line item in the budget, it's not a fund. It is a $5,000 line item right now. It's been in the budget ever since I've been here. It's for miscellaneous expenses that aren't budgeted that the select board feels are appropriate. For example, we talked about possible AV room improvements that didn't get into the budget, but if that, again, is an interest of the board, it could be used for things like that. But it doesn't roll over. It's a line item under our miscellaneous expenses. You can see it in the general fund budget.
He's talking about.
What I was referring to was the scholarship
The
fund
Bissonnette
itself,
fund.
Peter. But thank you, because that's a.
Sorry,
also
yeah,
a-
the Bissonnette Fund has a current balance of $787, and I believe there's $180 in scholarships already committed against that for this baseball season coming up.
I'd like to get some more history behind that scholarship fund.
Tim, you want to fill us in?
Sure will. Thanks. Tim Pudvar, 338 Woodbine Road. Served on the board for 8 years. I'm the former president of Shelburne Little League. So I want to make something perfectly clear. No matter what that fund balance is, no kid will be turned away. We're a very fortunate Little League, probably one of the most fortunate in the state of Vermont. We have a successful sponsorship campaign. Our snack shack has been wildly successful the last couple years. So no matter what that balance is, no kid would be turned away. It was established 20 years ago. Not the Bissonettes that we frequent up at the Dutch Mill. Another young fella who went through the program died tragically. It's a little vague, the history, but it was named after him, in honor of him. Maybe Colleen could add a little more to that, but so there it's been. Some folks anonymously donate. We'll have a tip jar. There's ways for us to keep that going. Again, a bat, a glove, and even registration fees. We're taking it from one pocket and putting it to another. So that's it. I just wanted to make it perfectly clear that no kid will go without if that fund went to zero. So thanks.
Tim, can I ask you a question, Tim?
Sure.
As the former chair of this board, do you have any opinion on the concept of recognizing former public officials with discretionary funds, or?
It is a slippery slope, dividing everything, people from process. I put together, this may be different, I put together, when Paul Boney retired after 13 years, an event where we recognized Paul. It was done completely with private dollars. Not a public dollar was used for that. I do think it's an awkward precedent, right? What are you saying to the people in the past? And is it then an expectation going forward? I don't think you'd have a problem at all raising private funds to accomplish your same goal. And as a side note, we have over 300 kids in our Little League and softball program. We stopped giving them medals. So we took that $2 or $3 out and giving each kid a medal. So we went away from that as with kids. Maybe we should with adults
Your
too.
comments are really reassuring, Tim, because one of the information points we had is that Little League registration concludes Friday, and there was some semblance of a time pressure to make scholarship monies potentially available before then, but you're.
I think Peter can concur. We have other fund balances that are robust, and we can make an internal transfer to accomplish that.
So
there's
you're
no haste.
reassuring that if there were a need,
No problem.
it would be filled,
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks.
Jerry, how do you feel about the fact that there was an announcement made at town meeting, and if we didn't proceed with making that donation tonight?
Well, as you recall, my announcement was that we would propose it at the next board meeting for discussion. I didn't commit to doing anything and deliberately omitted a dollar figure to signal to everybody that we wanted to discuss it out loud amongst ourselves with public input. So I'd be the first to be concerned if anyone felt that this was somehow a regression but the idea was to come to tonight to sit together and discuss pros and cons. If we're feeling that we're not of a mind yet, then we could schedule it for another 2 weeks. Other than that, if we feel we're agreed on an approach, then I would support what that consensus is. Chris?
So I'd like to echo what Tim just touched base on. I'd support the board wholeheartedly if you wanted to do a campaign to try and raise funds. Using town money, I think, is a mistake. It not only with regards to, as Tim said, there's other past volunteers who have put many years, thousands of hours into serving the community and have never been recognized, and how does that end up upsetting the apple cart in that respect? Also, at one time, I remember probably 35, 40 years ago, the town, when I was an employee here, used to give the employees every Christmas a turkey and $25 to show appreciation. And at one point it was decided that's not an appropriate use of town funds. So if you're going to take that away from employees who are working hard and say, but we'll do this for the volunteer staff, what does it say to your permanent staff as well? So to keep away from all of that, if you're going to do a fundraiser, I think that's a good idea. Using town funds, I would not agree with.
Thanks, Chris.
Don't we have employee recognition?
No, we do that. I also like to mention, Jerry, and I don't want to confuse the conversation, but the board does have a history of putting public funds to scholarships. In fact, last summer, when the Social Services Committee came here and requested money go to, and this board approved a few $1,000s, some going to the craft school for summer camps and some going actually for the town rec programs for scholarships to summer camps. So the board does have some recent history of approving public funds for a similar type of scholarship program. So, I do think that there's a precedent that the Select Board discretionary fund could be used in this way, make a meaningful difference for kids who are about to sign up for Little League and softball at a real opportune time, and quite possibly maybe the announcement of a donation, whatever the size is, from Select Board discretionary may incentivize others to give 10, 20 bucks as well. And so maybe it'll be used to leverage some additional. But it is a fund that is used. So you could be rest assured that it's going to a reasonably good cause for the community.
I think before.
I'm sorry. Those scholarship funds that last year, I vaguely remember those. What account did they come out of?
Social Services Committee.
Okay, I think that seems to be more of an appropriate place for something like if we were going to do, if that was going to happen. I still don't think it is a good thing to do, but I'm not sure the Select Board funds are the place in any case.
Jamie?
It's going on 8:30, so I just think we should try to move towards a decision on this, and I support the recommendation. I understand the points raised on the public funds, but they're discretionary funds for the select board, and I think I have no concerns with the precedent. I agree with Tim. We should have done this in the past, right? Like, there's no reason not to start this type of recognition. It's the numbers, we can find an amount that's appropriate, and of course, you can speak.
Mark, why don't you let Jamie finish before we'll recognize, excuse me, I'd like to let Jamie finish.
No, I was just going to say, I support the
mid-sentence.
recommendation, but I don't have a strong view on this, so if folks are not comfortable with it, then perfectly fine with that as well.
Luce Hillman, 331 Country Lane. I do have a real issue with this. I feel like it is a slippery slope. I think there's a big difference with giving scholarships from the social committee to the recreational committee, which serves most likely boys and girls equally too. I feel Little League is also a little more boy-oriented than
It's for baseball and
softball.
Baseball and
But
softball.
anyway, I still feel it's a slippery slope. Shelburne is known for its volunteers' longevity. There are a lot of people who give a lot of years here, and I just feel that this is the wrong use of public funds.
Mark?
I'd like to put something in perspective for looking there. I've lived here for 25 years. I served on a board for 10 years, and I can think of probably 6 people that have served on boards, one of which was at least 21 years, walked out of this room and was never recognized. Got on the DRB at a point when there were many members when the DRB was created that served on both boards. One meeting every week, months on end. I would suggest if you're going to do this, leave a name out of it, and if you're going to make a donation, put it in the name of those who have served past and present. They really should be recognized.
Thanks, Mark. I agree.
That's a terrific idea. That's a terrific idea. Susan?
Susan McClellan, Falls Road. One thing I'd like to ask, the discretionary fund, it's a line item, $5,000, and it doesn't roll over? So where does it go if it's not used? Surplus
And then it gets rebudgeted in the next year.
in the next
Yeah,
year?
Some
Okay.
amount.
Like, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Joan?
Just a quick question, Joan Lennis. Do we fund the baseball scholarships out of anywhere? No.
They're donations. It's best like, I think Tim was describing, they
Right,
have a
that-
jar.
that's
and
the only
money
place.
comes in
I just
through-
want
Yeah, up to this
clarification.
point, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Here are some questions I think we're asking. If the board wished to fund the scholarship, why wouldn't it have done it during budget? That's a good question. I think establishing a precedent is a good question, although I will echo, Mark, what Jamie said, that my sense of it is shame on them, that there wasn't recognition. It's easy to say in retrospect and perhaps impolite, but I'm a very firm believer in the fact that you do recognize volunteerism, and I wouldn't hesitate establishing a process where it does get recognized. I think the question before us is what is appropriate recognition? And I think you made a chief idea about potentially recognizing all who have served in the past, because this is not a named donation as proposed. It could be accompanied by some message or resolution from the board that this is intended to recognize all of the volunteers who served, including the chair. I think at this point it'd be interesting to hear whether there's a motion and to what effect. We haven't discussed amount, so I'm going to rely on whomever makes a motion to include some amount, if any.
I would just like to make one other I mean, based on the comments that you just made and some of the others I've heard, I think what I would like to do, rather than necessarily make a motion, but the motion I would make is to defer any action and towards developing a award policy in which that we could follow through. I mean, again, there's no urgency for accomplishing this tonight, but I think given the number of questions that have been brought up and the useful useful suggestions that have been made, that may be a way of trying to tie up all of these things in a way that more people feel comfortable.
Jamie, Colleen, comments?
Dr. Mess wanted to
Sorry,
say something
Doctor.
again.
Since I've been attending the board meetings, I've seen two discretionary appeals turned down. One was a settlement with people who unfortunately had sewage in their homes. That was a discretionary request. And number two was an amount for the Ethics Committee to hire independent counsel. So to me, putting a scholarship of an indeterminate amount, deducting that from the discretionary fund when early in the year, last year we turned down those appeals, and we have no idea what else might be coming down the pike. I'm uneasy about taking money from the discretionary fund.
The sewer fund,
we funded
we did fund,
hillside.
and we sent checks, or checks were picked up by everyone that was impacted. And then except for one instance with the Ethics Committee where there was a conflict, they've always been at least given the green light for me to move forward with independent counsel.
So, Josh, I agree that there should be, some policy going forward, but I don't think that it's mutually exclusive. I am concerned about the fact that we did say in town meeting, and where there was a greater representation of the town there, regarding that a contribution would be made, or implied that. I think that in the end, it's the intent was honorable, and it still goes to a good cause. I mean, I guess if Tim thinks that it's not needed, we could potentially make it towards something else. There's lots of great causes, and the food shelf would be one of them. And I think regardless, the idea that it's being used by people who need it would be appreciated by anybody. So I move to use $500 of the discretionary fund and donate it to the food shelf.
In recognition of former.
In recognition
officials?
of public officials that have served.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded to donate $500 to the Shelburne Food Shelf in recognition of public officials over a period of time who have served in various capacities for the town. Do you have a reaction?
If my head would stop spinning, I could sort of say, oh boy, things got turned around really quickly here, and it certainly doesn't make me terribly comfortable as to the item that's on the agenda and the item that we're voting on. So I find it difficult.
Mary?
Here's what's going through my mind, and I hate to delay this because I'm aware that, Jamie, you said it's 8:30 a while ago and we should move on. But when I vote and I walk through the gym, there's a long line of people asking me for money, and I think it's great. I'm not the one who gives. It's my husband. He's the one with the heart and the wallet. But so if And there are great causes that we all give to privately all the time. I did my favorites, the Veterans Memorial. So the question becomes, it's still sort of a slippery slope. Are we going to have folks in here at the annual reorganization meeting every year explaining why it is that there should be another gift given in recognition? So that's the problem I have. I think it's a great idea. I love the food shelf. It's very social too to go through that line of people. It's lovely. It's what makes Shelburne special. So that's my only concern, and I'm tortured by it because I just don't have enough experience under my belt to understand if, as a governance issue, it's a wise road to start to travel down. So that's my comment, and I appreciate the motion. It's made from the heart. I get it, but I'm not sure it's should be at this table particularly. So those are my comments. I'm ready to vote.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, those who approve the proposal that Colleen has made, would you like it reread or no? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay. By a 3-2 vote, it's approved. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Next item is to discuss and consider actions related to the Colleen Haig Public Service Award. Would the board like to initiate discussion? Joe, deferring to Joe first?
Sure. I came up with a proposal Friday morning for the board. I certainly have absolutely no emotional or other attachment to it besides it seemed like people were searching for at least an idea. And so I wanted to come up with a concept of how the community could move forward with this. So my idea was that the select board could appoint a committee that would have the authority to determine what the matrix would be for the decision making, and would have complete control and authority to make that award on behalf of the town, and without including the select board or the town manager. So that was the concept behind it. Certainly the details may need to be tweaked a little bit. And like I said, I have no attachment to the proposal besides I was trying to find a solution that would maybe be satisfactory, or at least get the ball started on a solution for the community.
Would you take a minute or two, Joe, so that everyone is aware of what, in a little more detail, what you propose?
Sure, I think it's online. I recommend to the select board creating a Colleen Haig Public Service Award Committee, creative name. Proposed mission statement to organize, manage, and award at the annual town meeting each March, the Colleen Haig Public Service Award. The committee shall be provided with full authority by the select board and will operate without its interference. I proposed a composition of the committee. Again, this is totally up but Colleen Haig, who would be on the committee and serve as chair. Any and all past recipients of the award, 3 at-large community members appointed by the select board. And then the town manager shall provide necessary staff support, but shall not be involved in the selection decision. So I think that kind of sums up the concept. Like I said, trying to find a solution that might work, and throwing it out there for the board and for the public to consider. And I caveated this that for this year's award, instead of being made at the annual town meeting, could potentially be made, as soon as possible, or if the committee was established recently, maybe it'd be awarded in May or something like that.
Is there anyone who would like to comment, start off with discussion? Linda?
Linda Reel, Falls Road. I think we have 2 things going on here. We have candidates who were nominated this year using the guidelines that were given, and that in itself leads to a different situation than developing a committee and looking at who may be nominated next year. And I think both sets of thoughts are good, but I think they're 2 separate issues, and I think they should be addressed as such.
Thanks, Linda. I'll comment very quickly that this is another item that is best discussed and debated if we can separate the person from the process. But thank you, which you most ably did. Doctor?
And maybe I'm missing it, but I'm still not hearing criteria for awarding it, for giving the award. And there has at least publicly been significant questioning of those criteria. For example, a volunteer versus a paid person. That's just one example.
Residents.
So there's significant controversy as to what the criteria are. And it's all well and good to have a committee, but the committee has to have guidelines in order to operate within a framework so that there's consistency. And then I think the strife, if we want to put it that way, will be a lot less because, because there's a lot less free swinging, so to speak. So criteria need to be developed and actually made public so that when people nominate someone or put a name forward, it's within that framework.
Thank you, Doctor. Mary, do you want to lead off board discussion? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Didn't see you.
Colleen and Jim.
I'm Jim Brangan, 393 Tracy Lane. I'm proud to say that I'm the inaugural recipient of the Colleen Haig Public Service Award, and I was quite humbled. No. I was quite humbled last year, and I sit here in this room looking around, and I'm still humbled. You look around in this room, and there are people that have served this community in so many different ways and in so many different capacities, yourselves included. And I feel that we need to get past this. And though my wife will probably say, what were you thinking? I'd be happy to serve on the committee working with Colleen to develop guidelines for this group to review and for us to develop a candidate for the Public Service Award. And possibly we could unveil it on town meeting. Oh, excuse me. Shelburne Day. Yeah, Shelburne Day. I'm sorry?
Colleen Haig started Shelburne Day.
Which Colleen Haig started.
Be appropriate. Thank you, Jim. Colleen?
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I was thrilled last year when I was not able to come to town meeting, but I was very, very satisfied with the candidate that was chosen, the person that was chosen. There could have been, as Jim said, 50 other people that I know, and many in this room, as we say. I was not around when all the hoopla went on with the Front Porch Forum and Shelburne News. I was actually away in South Carolina. The month of February is always a nice time to go away for several reasons, political and the weather. And so I was a bit taken back down there when I got a phone call and an email asking me to do something that I really wasn't sure I knew enough about or could actually feel comfortable about doing. So I was a bit on the fence. It seemed like it became a political problem, not a problem, but it was political, and I didn't feel that I wanted to get involved in that. That was not what my focus was, and so I'm a bit on the fence because I know that Jim Warden received so many accolades, and I worked with Jim so many years, and He was a wonderful guy. He did so much for the town of Shelburne, many things that no one, well, not too many people in this room know about, which was above and beyond what he did as a police chief. So I it put me in a situation where I was really uncomfortable. And I really wasn't even going to come tonight because I feel like, maybe you should do away with the award or just not have the award this year. But Jim and I talked about it, and we have agreed if to serve on a committee that would set up some guidelines so that we could assumably pick a person in town. There could be 100 that we could probably pick, but someone that we could pick that would we could give the award to. Maybe Shelburne Day sounded like a really good time. And I will have to say that, and all the things that I was given when I retired as town clerk, and I think it was probably, I don't know, Joe, if that was your thought, it was wonderful because I had a fellow town clerk who I was a peer. We traveled together. She was an inspiration to me, and she was Olga Halleck from Huntington. And over a probably 14-year period now, they have the Olga Halleck Award in Huntington every single year. And this year, there was some outcry because Yogi, the road commissioner, counterpart to what Paul Goodrich does, got the award. And he, like Paul, goes above and beyond everything. So he was an employee. So those are the kinds of guidelines or sentiments that we would be working with to try to figure out who a potential recipient of that award would be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colleen. We're really happy to hear that you're willing to involve yourself. That's great news. Mary?
I have actually some questions and then a comment. My question is, how was Mr. Brannigan appointed last year? By this body? After consideration of applicants?
Yeah, there was a similar announcement last year with, I don't know how, we probably had 4 or 5 different people who were nominated, and the board just picked one.
And why aren't we doing that this year?
The board decided not to.
Yeah, we discussed it in executive session, and I think there was a level of.
I think there was a level of uncomfort with the
Yeah,
lack of
discomfort.
criteria, especially on many board members' part. And we were uncomfortable with some of the ambiguity and just, in some ways, contradicting criteria that were being thrown around. So we weren't comfortable at that point making a decision.
Why was the board comfortable last year making?
I wasn't on the board.
I would say that it wasn't, I guess it just wasn't, it was brand new. And so there wasn't this political nature to it.
What's the political nature to this one?
That it's felt that there were members of the community that felt that something was owed to the police chief, and it may put the select board in kind of I guess a precarious situation, and whether that met the I guess the criteria that we had in mind the year before, and
which was
that the person was a volunteer, and then it was brought up, well, where did we ever state that it was supposed to be a volunteer? And so then that evolved into the rest of the conversation about, well, what criteria do we have? Well, if this is going to be such a heated argument, and maybe that detracts from the feeling of the award in the first place, then maybe we need to table this until we have some criteria.
What was the process used last year?
Last year, there was a number of nominations. We discussed it during the executive session, and but it was unanimous.
Was forgive me, is Mr. Brannigan a volunteer?
Yeah.
Thank you. Those are the only questions I had. My comment is this. Just looking at it from a global, larger governance issue, I know that an announcement went out and people followed the rules, and I don't think the board either votes or doesn't vote, but I think as a matter of governance, it's not the best policy to follow to set up a change in the procedures that aren't consistent with that which was announced. I think it's critical that the board do what it says it's going to do and follow through, otherwise we lose credibility as a governing body.
And I don't disagree with you. I think it was the fact that there was disagreement about what the nature of the award should be.
But that agreement, that's the fault of the board for
Right.
not having unanimity or common understanding of what the award is supposed to be, and not the fault of the public. So I think the board has to deal with the situation that it created and follow through with the expectations that it set for the public.
John?
Jones Harbour Road. I thought Colleen put the case for Jim Warden much more eloquently than I possibly could. It seems to me it's an open and shut issue. You award the man who deserves it, and in the view of most townspeople should receive it, and you award it in absentia if necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Linda, would anyone else like to speak before Linda speaks second? Tom? Linda, would you mind if Tom spoke first?
Well, I have a potential suggestion. How would it be if you took the names of the 3 or 4 or 5 people that you received, and you wrote them on each one on a piece of paper, put them in a fishbowl, and had Colleen pick one and make your decision that way?
I love the economy of it, yeah.
Linda Reel, Falls Road. I just want to clarify, Colleen, that of all the nominations that I read in the paper and on Front Porch, and the emails that I saw sent to the town manager, I never saw one letter that said we owed it to a certain person to select them. The nominations I read were very heartfelt, and why they felt a person was deserving of this award.
Sean, we're going to, we want to hear from the rest of the board.
It'll be quick. And I promised I wasn't going to speak tonight to Vivian, but I lied, I guess. My problem with what you said is along with the public comments in Front Page Forum and on the Shelburne thing because of the policy of openness, we read some of the letters that came to the select board via the town manager, and 2 in particular were quite ugly. They had nothing to do with nominating somebody. They had to do with tearing apart somebody who was nominated. I read them over and over. One from a legal person, one not from a legal person, sounded very much the same, which did nothing except tear down a certain candidate trying to influence the board with these letters. That's what I found appalling. I like a number of them. I like Colin, I like the chief, I don't know a couple of them. So I think there's many choices. It got ugly because of the surrounding things just got ugly. It got lawyers involved when the executive session went on, and all of a sudden we had to have legal on the phone for this. It was the board's own making and making this impossible for you guys now. a new board. That's all I have to say.
Sean.
Thank
Tim,
you.
do you want to add a few comments?
Yeah, I really would. A couple of things come to mind. The first being that since there was no real criteria established, that there's an opportunity here. Maybe it's not as simple as the fishbowl, but perhaps forming the committee with a past awardee and with Colleen and a couple other people appointed by this board, that we take a look at those nominations. I don't think that this award should become a popularity contest, because if it was, I wouldn't have won last year. I guarantee it. I think this is about public service. Let Colleen and I serve the public and help you guys out here. I will do my best to work with her and to be, as objective as possible, because I know what it feels like to get this award, and it's a big deal. So please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, any member, you have a comment?
Yeah, and again, I'll reiterate comments I made in the previous agenda item about, and forgive me if I get too hung up on policy, but I think that's the purpose of the select board, is to deal with this, and I think the proposal offered by Colleen and Jim makes a lot of sense. I also like to, just to clarify something that hasn't been brought up before, and I think was an issue with this meeting. In reality, the way the award was done last year was probably not. It certainly wasn't done according to the open meeting law, which because it was done in executive session, and there's nothing in the open meeting law which would allow a discussion of this kind of thing. And that would be a very similar thing of what happened this year. But I think and there was no vote in public session last year, which again would be a requirement of the open meeting law. And so that's something to be considered if a committee is formed. In that that committee, any deliberations, even if it's 2 people, if it's 3 people, is not something that can be a private meeting per se. If in fact this is something that gets taken outside of the governmental process, and it's a private award, that's a whole different kind of thing. So that's certainly a possibility. But I think the structure of what Joe stated sort of runs afoul of the open meeting law and may have too many people to start out. And so I think between Colleen and Jim, that seems to be a way to smooth our transition, both making an award this year and coming up with defined mechanisms that it could happen next year.
Thank you. If Jamie will indulge, I'd like to make a comment because Josh and Colleen and I were all part of the decision last year. So I think it's well to acknowledge, plain and simple, I think we were so enthusiastic about recognizing Colleen's service. We were so enthusiastic about the possibility of establishing something that commemorated her service in somebody else as an inspiration. And remember, it was intended to inspire service on other parts that we didn't. We didn't develop criteria. We didn't do it in public. We didn't do a lot of things we probably should have done. And I think the disappointment at one point this year was we hadn't done it. So I will say, as a participant in the process, I wish we'd done better. I wish we had the benefit of counsel and insight, but we didn't. My sense is that the task tonight is to construct some sort of apparatus going forward, either either a body as Joe has recommended, and I will follow quickly on Josh's comments that I don't see how this body is not subject to open meeting. I think that's problematic. I would favor a body that is within arm's length potentially of the board, because we would provide the hardware for the award and the moral support and the publicity and the encouragement for people to apply. My sense would be I'd like to see it lodged in the hands of if Colleen were willing and Jim were willing, in a committee of their own organization, on their own time, at their own direction, who simply concluded on an awardee and presented it to us so we could do our part. That's a suggestion. But Jamie, do you want to comment?
No, just very quickly, I wish we could do this simply. It's supposed to be a fun and lighthearted award and well-intentioned, and it's become very emotional and stressful and politicized at some level for whatever reason. So I feel like we need to look at this committee structure as a framework, and we have Colleen and Jim who are willing to lead the charge on it and pull some folks in from the community. I like how Joe scripted it out. It probably needs some fine-tuning at the edges, but I support the concept of a committee and agree that unfortunately you can't make it a surprise because of the open meeting law considerations. So the deliberations will be in public and they may be uncomfortable deliberations at some level, but that's the nature of what what we need to do. I think at this point, unfortunately, it can't be a surprise and it can't be held for an announcement. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's all I have.
I agree. I just want to be, clear. I think last year, when the main considerations and maybe we were a little lax in the way that we did it was that it wasn't a surprise. And Jim certainly had no clue that this was going to happen, and that was part of the fun.
That was a big part.
That was really the most enjoyable part of the whole thing. So it would be sad to lose that element, because that was a neat thing to watch Jim's reaction and his family's reaction and everything like that. So it would be sad to lose that part.
I think we should commit to making an award this year. So in whatever form this finally comes, I think there's more than opportunity. Memorial Day in the firehouse, which gets a big crowd, and the first to be sensitive to the solemnity of that occasion, as Colleen will know. But the afternoon maybe is an opportunity. Sovereign Day is another opportunity. I would hate to see us not make it this year, and if that were a commitment on the part of the board, I'd be pleased at that. How do we want to proceed, Colleen? Are there any other questions before we?
I have a question. I don't think I understand what's being proposed. Do I understand that the board is electing not to take action on this year's recipient to look at the nominations and make a decision, and rather create this committee comprised, at least at the start, with Colleen Haig and Jim Brannigan?
For this year's award, but it'll be awarded on Shelburne Day.
Yes.
Okay.
In other words,
Yeah.
just so we're clear, the board is deciding to change the rules of the game in the middle.
I would say that we are modifying it, having recognized that the way that we originally started was flawed.
I could make, and I think Mary makes a very good point about changing the rules. But as has been stated, the rules are hard. So, but we still have, as you said, we still have nominees. And so would you feel comfortable if, with the transfer of that responsibility, using the nominees that have already been made from the select board to the committee to make that choice? Or do you think it should remain as a select board choice?
I think I will vote on the motion when it's made. I just wanted to get clarification.
Okay, all right. Okay. Yeah.
There's no motion pending?
None.
No.
No.
So, but I feel one coming on, so I'm ready. Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
No.
All right, so I propose to establish a committee known as the Colleen Haig Public Service Award Committee, comprised of Colleen Haig and Jim Brangan, and three other members that we haven't even really three other members, to establish a list of criteria to henceforth be used to elect or choose a recipient of the Colleen Haig Award. And this year's Colleen Haig Award will be awarded at the on Memorial Day.
I would either make an amendment, is that.
Do you need a second?
Oh, yeah, sorry, we haven't had that.
I thought you were going to second. You going to second?
No, I
No,
won't.
I'll second for the purpose of discussion.
Thank you. I'm uncomfortable again, bringing this back to it has to be one or the other of I think that if such a committee would be formed, that it would be Colleen and Jim's responsibility to choose the additional member or members. If we want to pick a number, that's one way. But I think the recognition of the process already occurred, at least with people, is important. But so that's how I feel about that.
Clarification to the motion, please. Would the motion be such that the only potential awardees would be those who've been already nominated and are sitting in the hopper, so to speak, therefore those would be the nominees under consideration only? Because it's conceivable that the nominees wouldn't meet the criteria. If, just to choose an outlier example, the criteria were that the recipient had to live in Burlington, for example, then the current nominees might not meet that criteria. So that's the concern. That's an initial concern at any event.
So maybe then, I don't know, Colleen had a comment first.
My concern is, and Jim might feel the same way, I don't know, I'm not speaking for him, but Memorial Day might be too early a time to get a committee together, get the guidelines, and get information out to people, and then for us to look at the nominees. And, if it's not delineated that it should be that it has to be Memorial Day, we could do it on Shelburne Day or another day. That's the third Saturday in
Memorial?
August.
Oh, I meant
Shelburne
Shelburne.
Day always comes on the third Saturday of August.
Colleen, that was my error. I meant Shelburne Day. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Colleen.
I don't like to do things in a knee-jerk fashion. That's not how I operate.
Jim?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Colleen said. Shelburne Day will give us a little bit more time, and we can sit down with the current nominees and take a look at what the language was for soliciting those nominees, and have the conversation. In the meantime, we'll give you a list of names, or would we be appointing those names those people ourselves? How does that work, Joe?
My understanding would be the select board should really be appointing the committee members
Can appoint
itself.
its
No,
own members. It doesn't work like
it doesn't
that.
work that way.
Well, there may not be time then. Possibly we should, Colleen and I should work on those current nominees with the vague criteria we have and come up with a decision, and then come up with some criteria for how the committee should be structured, what the guidelines for the 2019 Colleen Haig Award winner should be, and have that committee in perpetuity, with hopefully the 2018 member serving on the committee next year.
So your thought is to just go with the candidates or the people who have been proposed so far, and just look at them and decide of them, the two of you of them, which of them you think is best deserved of the award, and then develop criteria for the following year?
I think with the short timeline, instead of forming a committee that has to be appointed by the select board, that's probably the best way to expedite this. However, I do want to make sure that this is all above board, that we are, we're transparent, and then when the award is given, that people feel that every candidate was given a fair shake. So I'll proceed in any which way the select board chooses.
Would the movement take it as a friendly amendment then, based on the discussion that just occurred, to set up the committee to go forward as of 2019 and have the select board deal with a selection of a recipient for 2018? Is that a friendly amendment or not? I guess we need a ruling from the chair.
I think it's friendly.
Okay.
Right. But I thought the thought was that Colleen and Jim would
Make the selection based on zero criteria.
But we're not putting together the committee.
I understand
they're not. Yeah. But that's exactly
we
what
wouldn't
I'm
make
suggesting.
it would just be between Colleen and
Yes, and then they would come up with a list of criteria to present to us to approve for the following year.
Well, I'd like to make an amendment if it's friendly. I will make a friendly amendment that a committee be formed as proposed for the 2019 Colleen Haig Award recipient, and that my proposal would be that the select board do what it set out to do for 2018.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
I was
do
like
what
that.
it set out to do, Mayor.
Well, I think I and many people in this room received an email saying it's time to nominate, and the at least strong implication was the select board was going to select a recipient for the award in 2018. And I strongly feel that when an announcement like that goes out, that it needs to be followed, that we can't communicate a proposal to the community and retract it. I think that's bad governance.
I don't disagree that it was bad governance. So I think we've admitted that it was a flawed process. And I at least would feel comfortable if we had input from the two people that would be continuing on with the selection process.
I'm not uncomfortable with, just to be clear, I'm not uncomfortable with the people being proposed to select. I think they're, I'm sure, extraordinarily capable. But I'm uncomfortable with changing the process in midstream. That's my point. But I'm ready to vote.
Yes, we have a lot of amendments.
Dave Hillman, 331 Country Lane. I'm not understanding, why does the board not feel it can make the decision? Because it sounds like you started out down that path and then got to some juncture that you couldn't make the decision. I guess I feel like since it was advertised and implied as such, I don't know why you can't. You did it last year, so why can't you do it this year? What changed?
No, it's a good point. I think the context of the decision-making changed, and there was such division of opinion, much less a division of opinion in the community, that it was felt that this was best, deferred to a later date.
And I think the reason that I feel uncomfortable is because it was pointed out that we didn't really have specific criteria. That's why I feel uncomfortable.
But you won't have it for 2018. You'll ask these two folks to make the decision with the same non-criteria.
Well, I think frankly, that's kind of the problem. I have no question, there's no question in my mind that we should make it this year, first. And that it should involve the nominees as the current nominees, second. I'm not entirely sure I'm with Mary on the idea that the board make a decision 2018 and ask a committee at the same time to kind of spectate and then make a decision in 2019.
Maybe if I could rephrase my question.
I'm sorry.
How will it be better having these two qualified individuals making it and not the select board? That's what I'm not understanding.
Well, because it's very problematic. That's no question about the fact. It's a very difficult decision to make.
Right.
I think there's reliance as well on those who have a broader, deeper understanding of the community. One of the things that was missing at the start that Colleen would reintroduce to the process is what we are commemorating.
I mean, is it because without the criteria you fear that this will be viewed as a political decision?
Well, it's a political decision in any case by the board. It's always a political decision. The question is, what criteria do you employ? Right. Joe, at one point, had an article in the paper that he might want to review that were, in effect, broad criteria for the award. So it's not as if there are no criteria at all. Correct. And it was against those criteria that a number of people were nominated, letters were written, and the board was presented with a variety of candidates.
Okay, thanks.
So I side with you, Mary. I don't think there's any. I think the question that I have is, I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how we would ask a committee to get involved and just spectate for the moment, but be involved for another year, and if that's the best use of the committee.
It would be my proposal that the committee be formed to set criteria for the award for 2019.
Yes.
Along the lines as suggested by Colleen in her motion.
Correct.
I'm trying to make a friendly amendment to the motion.
Correct.
I think right now, Colleen would accept a friendly amendment that says that Colleen Haig and Jim Brannigan make the decision for 2018. Okay. Do I understand that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Rather than the select
confused.
board.
No, I'm confused.
Who is
too.
going to make the decision for 2018?
I thought that's what Jen and Colleen were suggesting.
I didn't understand that, Mary. I'm sorry, from your friendly amendment. So you'll
I'm not
forgive
sure what
me.
the motion was.
I heard it very differently.
Amendments, so I'm not sure which one.
Don't we have time to develop criteria before Shelburne Day? It's not-
Absolutely.
I mean, in my opinion, I feel like if you have a few other folks on your committee who can help develop the criteria in the next few months and then make a decision for 2018, the criteria can be rolled over going forward, right? Maybe, I don't know, Jim and Colleen, if that's not enough time, then it seems workable to me. It's March. We have a few months to get it done by
Yeah, we have
August.
till August.
Yeah.
What I would propose then is that we develop a criteria that we could use from here on out. And we take those nominations that were given to Joe and we apply those nominations to that criteria.
Correct.
And we can make the announcement on Shelburne Day in August. And we can certainly run that criteria by the board, absolutely. We'd have to get your approval and moving forward.
I mean, I admit I've sort of lost track of what the motion is.
There's a motion on the floor with a friendly amendment. The question should be called.
That's what I was asking.
Well,
Is
I'm not
I've
willing to
lost.
call it until I
I've
completely
lost track.
understand, because I now hear two different things. I hear the board should make the decision solo, on its own, at this point or soon, for 2018, with such criteria as were introduced by Joe in the paper, and that we should establish a group, a committee of some definition, since there's still question about application of OML and the size and such. And then I hear that we should supply to the committee the names of these same nominees, ask them to establish criteria which then act as a filter, and defer to them to the decision. Help me, Mary, to understand which one the amendment specifies.
I understood that the amendment would be simply to give it to Colleen Haig and Jim Brannigan to decide for 2018.
Okay.
if that's acceptable to the movant.
Yeah, so my original movement was that we would establish this committee, they would establish the criteria and decide for 2018 and going forward.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that. I'm sorry to have confused the issue.
No problem. No problem.
I'm ready to vote.
I'm gonna call the question up.
Yeah, if you could just repeat the,
So I move to create the Colleen Hague Public Service Award Committee, which will be comprised of Jim Brannigan and Colleen Hague, who will establish criteria and decide the recipient of the 2018 Colleen Hague Award and going forward.
Friendly amendment, once again, please. Friendly amendment would be that the decision for the 2018 recipients would be made from the existing nominees.
Okay.
Yes. We all agreed? I'm going to call the question as proposed. Would you signify approval by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And disapprove by saying nay?
Nay.
nay.
Nay. 2.
Who seconded that motion? Did Mary? All right.
I have no idea.
Thank you.
I think you did, Jerry.
The original motion? I don't know.
We
It was a
were
while ago.
voting on the motion as amended.
I was trying to follow.
Me too.
All right.
We have 2 lawyers. They're a tremendous resource. They're going to be a big help. Okay, next item. To consider request to waive property tax penalties per select board policy and late homestead declaration request. Some of you may remember that at a point in December, we were asked to consider two requests, which at that time we felt could not be approved for a lack of really a coherent, consistent policy. And we've developed that policy, as some of you also know, and at a point not too long ago, we approved that policy. It was my feeling that we should reintroduce these 2 requests given the fact that we now have a stated policy.
Yeah, so just to be clear, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, the 2 that fit under the policy that you passed a meeting or 2 ago are the 2 handwritten ones from Tom and from David. And then the one actually at the beginning of your packet from Michael C., I guess. It doesn't fall under this policy. It's for their late homestead declaration. Is that correct, Peter? Or did I get that wrong?
The first one is a request for the waiver of the penalty also.
Oh, okay.
So we have 3 penalty waiver requests.
Got it.
The 4th one was to waive the late filing charge or penalty for filing the homestead declaration late.
Oh, sorry, I didn't flip to the
So there are
last page.
four actually. that
I
would be
apologize, I
acting on.
didn't flip to the last page. So the first 3 that you have, first one's a penalty of $99.91. And then you have the $127.06, the $267.07. Those would all, you're making a decision based on, well, presumably based against this policy.
Should we go one by one? Mr. Chair, does that work?
Yes, I think we have to.
Okay.
May I hear a motion regarding the request from Michael C.? Michael Caldwell?
Okay.
So this would be a motion to waive the late property tax payment penalty in the amount of $99.91.
That's
in
correct.
reliance on our policy number 2, would it be? Is this the relocation? Reading it, it's a little
Yeah.
challenging to understand what it would be a relocation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, I would say.
That's how I
Yeah,
read it.
I would say
Okay.
that applies.
This is your
Should I
first go
read-
at it with your policy, so this
Yeah.
looks like if you're going to approve it, it potentially would fall under 2.
Number 2.
Yes, seems to me specific.
So the motion is on the floor.
Yes, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, those who approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Second of that.
And in the case of, who would be next, Joe?
Okay, the next one is from David Parmalee. This was one that you looked at probably back in
Yes.
November, and that's was kind of one of the catalysts to complete this policy. I think at the time you were edging towards granting the waiver, but you wanted to develop a policy to give you more guidance. This kind of started the whole thing. So,
I'd make a motion in that case to waive the late penalty on account of health reasons.
Second.
Yes, number
Number
3.
three.
Yeah,
Yeah.
number 3. Motion moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, those who approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. And the third would be Joe.
okay, the third one from Tom Rutz. This one you also looked at.
Make the
Another
same
one?
Yeah,
motion.
can I just make a disclosure on this? Tom and I are former colleagues at Keurig, but I can make a decision in a fair, impartial manner in the best interest of the town.
So I move to waive the
And do not
penalty.
recuse.
Is that agreeable to the board?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Thank you.
I'll renew the motion again. To waive it for health reasons.
Number
Second.
Same
3.
for number 3. What applies is number 3. A second?
Second.
Second, Colleen seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, those who approve signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That's a pleasing development after,
Yeah, thank you.
after
There's
some
another
months.
one.
And then the last one that you can
Oh,
talk
I'm
to this
sorry.
Doesn't, I don't think you would look at it under the policy. This is actually for a late homestead declaration request.
Sorry.
I don't know, Peter, if you want to walk them through this. This is a new request.
And Mr. Galbraith is here to speak to it as well. But the request here is to waive the late filing penalty for filing the homestead declaration with the state of Vermont after the deadline. Mr. Galbraith has provided information here that he did mail tax documents to the state and assumed that his homestead declaration was in it well before the deadline. And talked with the state, and state indicated they did not receive the homestead declaration. So as a result, he was charged a penalty of 3% of the school tax for filing the homestead declaration after the due date.
Is this a common occurrence, Peter? Is this something that's happened before, or has there been requests like this before?
I think we had a similar request about a year ago where a property owner provided information that they had mailed the documents to the state. The state indicated again that they didn't receive them. And that was taken up by the board maybe a year ago, I'm guessing.
Can I disclose something? We were that case. And actually, the accountant had failed to give us the sheet to sign, and he acknowledged the mistake. He actually appealed to the state, and I recused myself. But I understand that my husband came in and correct me if I'm wrong, but Peter, you said that you had never actually seen where the state had approved an appeal and acknowledge based on the acknowledgement by the accountant of the mistake. And but clearly we only own one home and it's here in Shelburne, so we were in full compliance with the law as well. And gratefully the board allowed us to waive that penalty as well. And so, understanding, this particular circumstance from that point of view, if it's true that Mr. Galbraith, this is their only home and it's here in Shelburne, then they are in compliance with the law, and, sometimes things like this happen.
Just to be clear, it falls outside the policy.
Yeah, it does.
Right. I mean,
The
this,
other thing that I'm confused at, and I apologize my understanding, and please, Peter, if I got this wrong, but I thought that if you don't file the homestead declaration on April 15th, you can still file after that.
And
And-
get a
and-
late
and
filing
get it.
penalty, which is what happened in this case.
Well, and this may not be to my advantage to say, but I think that's what happened with us last year, that we did not file on time, but and then we got a refund. So I'm just confused. I mean, when we did file later on in October, and maybe it was then, that's when we filed our taxes late. So
this is about Mr. Galbraith.
I'm really confused. I was just trying to understand the process. That's all I was bringing up. I was trying to understand
I'm
the
not
process.
familiar with
We
your
have significant
situation.
proof that
Speak
Mr.
to that.
Galbraith, in fact, did send to the state, so I'd certainly be willing to waive the late fee if it's within our power to do so, I assume.
Yeah, the town keeps the penalty, so it's not something that goes to the state, so I believe you would have authority to waive that.
So I'd make that motion.
Second.
It does, can we make comments? It does bring us back to the same conversation on our uncomfort with lack of defined criteria. It sounds like it's happened before, which is perfectly fine, but I think we all struggled a little bit with the two that were in front of us at that time a few months ago and not really having clear criteria to make an assessment or a decision. So I remain a little uncomfortable with the one-off when we don't have criteria.
Yeah, and we also had a discussion about evidence, you recall. And one of the difficulties was that the state you couldn't produce evidence here. It was just, the only evidence was they don't have it. And,
But they're certified.
yeah, I understand, but we're talking outside of policy at the moment. And I'm just commenting that we had quite a bit of discussion about what was acceptable evidence.
I think
Does
Mr. Galbraith did discuss this with the tax department. It may be helpful to have him provide the information.
Can you answer, does this happen often? I mean, how many of these should we expect to see in a given year?
Well, I see a lot of late filing penalties.
For the homestead declaration.
But as far as someone requesting that it be waived, there's been very few.
What does that mean?
Probably less than 5, certainly, where
Per
someone's
year?
come and request, yeah. at
Okay.
this point.
Mr. Galbraith,
For this
would you like
particular
to-
situation.
The person I spoke to at the tax department, all these letters are received and processed by a machine, which apparently slits open the envelopes and makes PDFs. And if it doesn't make a PDF, then they say it wasn't received. So, for instance, if two pieces of paper were stuck together and went through the machine and it didn't make a PDF, then it's not received. And when I said to them, well, can you prove that you didn't receive it, talking to your point of evidence, they said, no, we can't, because the machine does it, and once it's been through the machine, everything is shredded. So they can't prove that they didn't get it, and I suppose, in fairness, I can't prove that I sent it, except that it's prepared by a professional, and we managed to send it for the last 22 years without any problem.
And I think this case is pretty similar to, I know there's not a rule on point, but it's pretty similar to our procedure number 6.
Right. Yeah, I wondered 6 or
Yeah.
7, but I mean, I'm sympathetic to it. I just know we struggled with making decisions based on sympathy and emotions, and the fact to seem to support that you did everything you were expected to do here, and somehow things went haywire with the state, which, as we know, happens.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I guess my question in this is this just something other that we can simply, if it isn't part of this policy, is it something that we can do like we did before is just to defer this to decide whether we want to, amend this policy to add this, and then we'll take it up again.
I think the same criteria should apply. I
Yeah.
don't know a lot.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've seen a late homestead declaration, but it sounds like it's very similar to a late property tax payment, right? So the
Yeah.
same criteria
correct?
should apply, and if
Can we
we,
just add homestead exemption to the rule?
maybe, it's as simple as, right?
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, that could be that simple.
And then we have to adopt the policy.
And then
Well, we haven't
Readopt.
adopted the policy yet.
Yeah.
So,
We have, didn't we?
did we?
I thought we did.
Yes, we did.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
apologize.
And take this up again next meeting.
So the next
I'd be
meeting,
comfortable
you're
with
gonna
that.
Have a decision to consider amending the policy,
At
which
the
you can
time we
do.
amend the policy.
And
yeah,
then there might be a agenda item after that to reconsider
to
this
apply it
request.
to this case.
I think that makes
Is that
sense.
acceptable, Mr. Galbraith?
Yes, I suppose in the interim, I have to pay the penalty because taxes are being due this week.
And then there'd be a reimbursement if the,
Can't we do a one-off right now and then just amend the policy?
And then paying,
you have a motion on the
staff
floor.
to,
You have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
With a second.
Sort through
with
it.
a
So
second.
let's take a vote.
Let's
Yes.
take a vote.
Sure.
All those who approve the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, nay? The ayes have it.
As a general matter, I would like us to just be conscious of
Yeah.
the lack, I don't know what we're losing here with all these penalties, but I know we talked about it as a board, but I think we just have to keep that front of mind as we sort of start to experience this policy and the exceptions, and if the volume starts to tick up because the select board's actually considering and approving a lot of these waiver requests, then we just have to maybe check ourselves on, is it the right policy for the town?
I'm sorry, was that last vote 4-0, 5-0?
5.
It was 5-0?
Unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just,
Can we just get it into the agenda?
yes, and
We
with
should, right?
a request that it go into the agenda
Yeah.
for next.
Do you
Yeah.
think we could take like an intermission? Can we take an intermission?
Yeah, you want to take a recess?
Just like a 5-minute?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
With everybody's agreement?
happy with that.
Recess
Okay.
here.
Can we?
We're going to resume the meeting with everybody's approval. And now take up item number 10, which is to consider approving liquor license renewals. Joe has provided us from Diana, a list of those.
So Jerry, I have to remind you that you're going to have to call to order a meeting of the Liquor Board of Control, the local commission. You guys are, when you do so, you're a quasi judicial board. And the first thing you'll need to do, I'm just reminding you, Jerry, is to ask for any disclosures of conflicts of interest as a quasi judicial board.
So we will call to order that board, having no reference in front of me, but Joe described it. And we will ask for any conflicts of interest on the part of any member regarding any of these licensees.
None.
Hearing none, offering none. We can proceed then as a board, correct?
Yes,
And
yep.
can we
as the-
consider them in toto?
Why don't we do per
By class?
license request? So to remind the board of first-class license, so this is with Heart of the Village Inn in Conchita Antica. This is for sale and consumption on premise. That's what a first-class license is. So these have been reviewed by our police department, and there's no known issues internally with these requests. So
Move to approve first-class liquor license to Heart of the Village Inn and Cucina Antica.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, you signify approval by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and if you oppose, saying nay.
Aye.
Ayes have,
Sorry, I was late.
Oh, you're an aye.
the ayes have it unanimously. Would you describe outside consumption for the benefit of
Okay.
the audience? and the
Outside
board?
consumption, I'm guessing you can pick up on what that is. That's sitting outside and having a drink. So, that's all the one. I don't have much more of an explanation than that.
Move to approve an outside consumption liquor license to Heart of the Village Inn.
Thank you, Colleen. A second?
Second.
Seconded by Josh. Any discussion? Hearing none, would you signify approval by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye, and disapproval by saying nay. The ayes have it And in the case of second class, Joe?
Okay, second class is for the Shelburne Country Store. And a second class license, to remind the board, is when you purchase a beverage to take home and consume off premise. So like a bottle of beer or a spirit or something like that, and that you would not have on premise.
I move to approve second class liquor license to Shelburne, or Mayfield DBA Shelburne Country Store.
And a second?
Second.
Jamie, is there any discussion? Hearing none, would you signify approval by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye, and a disapproval by saying nay? Ayes have it. Having been subject to Diana's several requests about not having signed all the things, I would ask all of us to be sure tonight to sign
Yeah.
all of them.
My experience, I think, in 4 years, I think we're 0 for whatever as a board. So
Please make it a point
I
before
will
we go
pass
home.
this around. Not only sign it, but make sure you sign where it says approve and not disapprove. It can be very confusing. I try to make sure that where it says sign here is at the approve part. So
Are these
we'll
all
pass those over.
one-year terms?
They're all one-year terms. Yeah, I think this concludes all of the liquor license requests except for, I believe there's one outstanding still, and I don't know which one that is, but, we'll deal with it whenever it comes in.
Okay.
So please be sure to do that before we finish. The next item is to consider setting a time, date, and program for the annual Select Board retreat and planning meeting. I'd like to open that up for discussion and ideas, beginning with Colleen.
Oh.
I can start. I sent out a bunch of dates to the board, and it appears that the 5 of you have very different schedules, so it was difficult to find any date that seemed to work for more than 2 or 3 at a time, so I kind of gave up on that endeavor. Maybe the question is, Mr. Chairman, of how soon do you want to get together, or how far do you want to push that off? I mean, it's nice to get together not too far away, or we can't really set goals and then work towards them during the course of the year. On the other hand, I can understand that you may want to try to develop a sense of cohesion before, but it's whatever the board wants to do.
So the April dates fell flat, I assume?
Yeah, I
Okay.
wasn't
Everybody had conflicts.
it was hard to find something.
There's definitely days in April that I could do it. Do we
Can
want
you
to discuss
refresh us
this
on
now?
the April? Up to you. Do you want to go through dates now, or try to
Or do we want to
do
do
it
this?
offline
Well, I
and do
think
it?
the first cut is, do we want to do it on an April schedule, an early April schedule, or is there interest in doing it in later April? If not, can we work through early April?
I will not be here in later April.
No, okay.
There's school vacation and
Yeah.
last week.
All
of
right, so
April.
we're focused on early April, and the question is working out a time.
You want
Yeah,
to do
I
a
see
doodle
two.
poll? That's worked for other boards, no?
Yeah, we can do that. I think maybe this board might have even more work conflict than the previous board did, so I think it's making it even more difficult for
Yeah.
us to find time that works for the 5 of you. But I can send out a doodle poll and shoot for the first 2 weeks of April tomorrow. Is that the easiest thing to do? And then
I'm pretty
maybe,
much okay
and maybe
except
in the
for Friday.
meantime,
Great idea.
and maybe, thank you. And maybe in the meantime, I don't know if there's any thought from the board, I'm just throwing this out, are you gonna facilitate it yourself? Do you want someone else to facilitate? What sort of program do you want? Et cetera. Or are those decisions you want to make on a different day?
Well, we would be holding this after the 27th meeting, correct?
Sounds like you're gonna have at least 2 meetings under your belt,
Yeah. So
this one and the next one.
how about we present for just our own discussion, an item on the 27th that lays out the structure of the retreat and major issues to be addressed and the process we're going to follow, just some ideas, not to overwork the thing, but to give everybody, including the public, an idea.
Right, well, and I would like to add the suggestion that we offer the opportunity for the public to make suggestions of of items that might be considered in the retreat. And I would also like to just, I think I always like the idea of a facilitator. But I also have raised the issue in the past, and one of the items that I'd like to be on the retreat, that we look at this as a planning session to do a more robust strategic planning procedure after this. So the retreat itself would not be an end in itself, but would help us identify areas where we could use more community input and with a longer term concept than what we're going to accomplish in 1 year.
Comment? Joe routinely, as we know, prepares a schedule, in effect, or a timetable of decisions, future decisions. And I think that would be something maybe he and I could work on so that we had that definitely in front of us.
We've usually generated that actually as a result of the retreat. We've kind of come up with whatever 7, 8 priorities that the select board was going to have, and then we would schedule them so that we knew when they were kind of going to appear on the agenda, obviously with some flexibility that, like when's the comprehensive plan going to start, when are we going to start talking about stormwater, when are we going to talk about these other things that we know are coming up. So
well, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
Large picture items, even budget, even the started budget, so that we had some sense of what the time schedule is going to look like throughout the summer.
Could you circulate the last list maybe?
Yep.
For the group to just
Absolutely.
get a sense of what the priorities were last year, and then we can chew on that.
Good idea.
And I think in the past, the chair usually asked for, like, individually what our highest priorities were, compiled that list, and then that was one of the first things that we went through was, whatever it was, is this a priority for everyone? And then we, did like kind of like a hierarchy. And then the other, I guess, is do we have a location yet?
I was going to wait to find a timetable. I
Okay.
mean, I think it would probably depend if we're doing a lunch or a dinner or none of the above, and that will impact where the location is.
Yeah.
Okay. And with everyone's permission, Joe, could you add something like that to your weekly report? And that, telling the public, that we would appreciate contributions on their ideas of what might be included in the retreat, and I guess they could, I don't know how to.
I can do that, and also individual select board members could ask the community at large on Front Porch Forum or so, since they're trying to generate feedback. That would be an acceptable way to do it too, as well, right?
Okay. If is everyone okay with that idea?
Yeah, sure.
Both work well.
Yeah. I'm gonna just to repeat that idea, if it wasn't well understood. If our rhythm in time now is to present, discuss, have in front of us one meeting, make decisions on the second to allow plenty of time, then it seems to me the time frames for a variety of things, including things like municipal utility reports, the started budget, some of the housekeeping that has to be done by time certains, like, water commission, that kind of thing. It would be useful to have that in some form, some calendar form, if we're going to do some strategic planning. I'm particularly interested in early involvement with the town plan, with budget, and earlier than we have in the past. And just to throw something out, it doesn't seem to me that maybe that's a September start on a couple of those things. Maybe it's a July. And that's going to burden Joe unless we organize it with him so that the work is distributed fairly evenly and we don't just burden staff. Okay?
Okay, so we'll come back next week or 2 weeks from now and make a decision.
Yeah. Is there any comment, any discussion?
Crack Family Lodge.
Yes.
That sounds nice. Yeah.
Good idea.
The select board, they have a select board institute through the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, which is outstanding. And it may well be that several of us, I'd even considered going again. It's a very thorough, very outstanding seminar. But it's in some place called Lake Maury. Yeah.
Lake Moran.
It's very pretty.
Yeah,
But
which
it
sounded
ain't no
distant.
Trapp family lines.
It's not.
Can't get there from here.
No.
Yeah,
it's a ways.
which didn't sound like you'd leave at
Yeah.
8:15 in the morning to make a 9 o'clock session, so, but it's an outstanding seminar, it really is a very worthwhile. So you can all help me with how to find Lake Maury. Yeah. We're now considering item number 12, which was in the original numerical order, which is to consider authorizing the town manager to finalize and submit comments on behalf of the Select Board with input from the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee regarding the public comment notice for proposed changes to the Vermont wetland rules to reclassify the La Platte River Marsh prior to the March 19th deadline. You want to?
Give it my best. So the select board last spring submitted comments, so I guess more questions with the help of the Natural Resource Commission. That's the first document in your packet. We had a site visit in October with a few of us. Jerry and Josh were there, along with Gail and Susan from the Natural Resources, and then the rescue chief was there, wastewater superintendent, myself, maybe a few others. We met with the DEC staff on site to look at what impacts it might have specifically on any of the town-owned buildings. So there's a little right up there in your packet. And I know that there was a public hearing here yesterday, which I believe Mary and Josh may have attended. I don't know if some others did. So they may know even more than I know at this point. And certainly at the end of the day, these would be select board comments. So, you know, when you have to have a sense of what the board is feeling. I do have a concern that is just unknown. Josh and I also had a meeting a week or two ago. I don't remember when it was, Josh, with one of the representatives of DEC. And it still is a little unclear to me what this reclassification would mean for our efforts in replacing the Bay Road Bridge. And that's probably, at least as with just concerning myself with town facilities, that is the unknown that I don't have a clear answer on anyhow. And I don't know if it became more clear yesterday. I wasn't here yesterday, and that would be a concern. I know the preferred alternative that the select board in 2009 or 2011 selected for the Bay Road Bridge that we're still operating as our preferred alternative is a larger, taller, wider bridge. And if there is a reclassification here, that potentially could impact our ability to build to that preferred alternative. I don't think it would impact us if we tried to replace exactly what is there. But if we do something different, there could be a problem.
We would need a permit.
Yes.
We would need a permit.
And that's the sense that I got, that with the reclassification, it would have to fit within its current boundaries, or as long as it doesn't impinge on the wetlands. So that may be a different design, a different way of creating a bike path, different height, but the criteria is, thank you, that you have to make a argument for how a change to the wetland permit or to the Class 1 permit would affect public health and safety. And when you're talking about a bridge, that may be a lot easier than a lot of other things. But it still would have to be permitted. But my sense is DEC is certainly willing to work with the town on that, but it may require a potentially different design.
So there's also a bigger setback with the wetland criteria, the phase 1 or class 1. It's a 100-foot setback as opposed to a 50-foot setback, but existing structures are grandfathered in. I do want to point out that Mary Goodrich was here along with her colleague. His name I've forgotten. for ambulance.
Linda, about rescue.
Yes, and they wanted to make sure that there was going to be no impingement on their ability to operate, and their understanding is, and the question was asked yesterday of the people from DEC, that they'd
Yeah,
be
that
able
was
to.
cleared up with our site visit. I think it was
Right,
very clear that this change would have
Zero
impact on our existing facilities and any plans even that we would have to expand. There was no sense that there would be an impact there. Now, the bridge is a different story. That could be an issue.
Expanding would be an issue, wouldn't it? Because you have the same
Because we're not talking.
criteria as soon as you start.
Expanding the bridge.
Oh, if you do something with the wastewater treatment plant, if you do anything to modify a structure within the buffer.
It could, but the plans that we have now, I mean,
No
it's hard.
plans.
It's hard to
Yeah.
right. I don't know what's going to happen in 50 years from now, obviously.
Of
But
course,
there was
yeah.
nothing that, and I think I captured that in that October 17th email, that there was nothing that came out in that site visit, and Josh and Jerry were there, that made any of us, including Linda, including Chris, with the wastewater plant, kind of pause and feel, uh-oh, here we go. Now the bridge is a different story. That could be an issue.
I did ask about the railroad salt shed. I was curious about whether or not the reclassification would have any impact on the railroad. And no, they said.
Not on the existing structure.
No,
right?
no.
Just
Well,
like
even
any
expansion, they talked about preemption,
Oh, they did?
which I was sort of sorry to hear, but
All right, our task is to develop a response. By the end of the week, my understanding is the Natural Resources Committee meets tomorrow night.
Correct.
So,
What's the board, I mean, you've been close to this issue. What's the sense from private property owners? I saw a few references that the shopping center had been addressed. They took care of Brian's issue and.
If you notice in the thing that Joe put in the packet, all of the questions that were originally addressed have been
Adequately
answered today. And all of the public concerns about property issues, except for one, have been issued, and they were, there was a discussion yesterday about the DEC staff working with this property owner. And there seemed to be a reasonable time frame that could still happen. So my thing, unless Natural Resources has something else that we don't know about, I haven't found any other issue that we can make other than, it seems like, we could support the idea of the reclassification because we haven't identified any issues that are of great significance.
yeah, there seem to me to be three elements. One, that we should adopt language such as Susan wrote in the prologue last fall, which establishes the fact that this is a unique resource and we support its reclassification. Two, that maybe not in order, that we express appreciation to agency staff for the amount of work they did on the ground. A process I've learned is called groundproofing, and that was apparently thorough and satisfactory to all private landowners that I spoke to, as well to the town. New Village Farm was a major. You remember they had little ribbon gullies, and those have all been relined. Yeah. Same thing behind the Shelburne supermarket that Brian. So, and I think the third element has to be a continued expression of concern on our part that we not be subject to double jeopardy on permitting a Bay Bridge improvement. There's no question it needs to be improved, but I think the concern might be that we get an overlay of permitting that delays the entire process and may interfere with at the point a decision is made, and I'm going to guess the decision's made when it really ought to be improved, and we could be looking at a multi-year delay. On the other hand, it's pretty clear that the agency, none of them can prejudge that and assure us at this point. But I think it'd be worth, again, mentioning that that's a concern of ours.
What do you mean by double jeopardy?
Well, we might have a permitting of two different kinds. One, if we had transportation funds, And, I mean, it's a bridge, and there might, I'd be fine, of course, if the state in one body issued permitting criteria and we followed them. But if there were several agencies involved, either because of the funding or because of the structure itself, I'm just a little concerned that we don't get subject to what might be onerous.
Are we able to ask them, have there been instances where a bridge or a similar infrastructure has been rehabilitated or modified in a Class 1 wetlands? Have they made a determination that it would be in the public, there's a compelling need for?
Did they say it's Shelburne and Peacham that are the only two
they're-
in the state that are going to be, that are being looked to be reclassified in this way? So there's no
No precedent.
precedent.
So there are no bridges in the state that are within
I don't think there's any
Class
big
1
bridges
wetlands
in Peacham.
delineations? Okay.
Right, and this is,
That's a good point,
this
though.
has happened, and there was a sort of a rewrite of all of this in, I think, 2012, she said. And so this process, so this is the first, this is the first new application of this so far.
All right,
So
we
there's
have-
no way that we can kind of have verbiage that says that we realize that there is an issue with the bridge and because our current plan, or at least the plan that we had talked about, was adding like a walking sidewalk to the edge of the bridge, which would make it wider. I mean, there's no way to kind of put verbiage in there so that those plans aren't necessarily short-circuited before we need them. Because if it's reclassified and we can't get a permit because it's Class 1 wetlands, then
The worst I think that can happen is that we wouldn't be permitted to make a larger bridge. A structure can be, that an existing structure can be
Replaced.
repaired.
But my concern is we've already noted publicly many times that we need a wider bridge.
Okay, so.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
For example, so when I said about the potential redesign, so what I understand is it's how you make the bridge right. The reason you want to make it wider is so there's a pedestrian and bicycle. So not being an engineer, so I'm not talking from knowledge, but there may be a way to cantilever such a wide thing that doesn't impact the wetland below. So essentially, instead of putting a wide bridge with pilings down in, you actually have it off to the side and support it that, because you're not talking a lot of weight.
I mean, I don't know. I can't answer the question if someone asks me, what is the benefit to the town for this reclassification? I mean, if it's symbolically to say that this is a important ecological area, I mean, fine. But I don't know if we can, I'm not sure, at least I wouldn't be able to answer, is the town better off with this reclassification or not? I'm not convinced that there is a reason for us to say that we either support or don't support. I think we can send a letter saying.
I disagree. I don't think it's symbolic value. I think the wetlands have very real, as you see in the report, functional value.
I'm not
for purposes of
but whether
stormwater
that means a
mitigation.
reclassification
In a lot of ways, it syncs up well with the town plan goals with respect to natural resources. So
I agree with Jamie.
I mean, I feel like this is one that
Yeah.
I agree.
feels right.
It's a jewel.
No question about it.
Yeah.
So
that,
I do see value in a recommendation that
doesn't
supports this,
equate.
but I'm concerned about do we paint ourselves in a corner with the bridge issue that we don't know much about it, right? It's sketched out as a concept.
Saying that we all agree it's valuable is not the same, I think, as saying that it should be reclassified, because I don't know if it's clear.
We said in the fall, Joe, that we supported reclassification in abstract.
Yeah.
So I don't know why we would say differently now. I mean, I agree. I think the uniqueness of the resource, the preciousness of it, and in the end, not a lot of difference between 2 and 1.
50 feet of buffer.
50 feet of road.
Well,
That's
but
exactly the difference.
but
yeah,
on the ground,
right.
yeah,
Not much.
when you look at it, it's not, the impacts having been introduced and basically dealt with, such as in the initial, as you know, in the initial rendering, the rescue building was entirely within the buffer zone. So having accomplished that, I don't know, I simply have no reservations about saying we support reclassification with the exception of addressing the bridge in some way to at least keep attention on it.
Right.
Well, the comment period hasn't ended, so it's we have an opportunity to make a strong public comment about that. But I understand that what it takes is just a permit, and if you can make a good argument that you're not further impairing the wetland, then they're going to grant you that permit. One thing that's very interesting is, in addition to the sort of recreational value, is that this wetland area serves us so well for high water, which is happening more and more because it's about 250 square miles, believe it or not.
Yeah.
No, wait.
Yeah.
And it can absorb a huge amount of water. So the good news for us when we're getting increasing high water marks, it operates as a way to absorb that, and so it protects the town in a lot of ways. But I think if we can make the public comment, I would suggest that we allow the Natural Resources Committee to comment and just shoot their comments directly, if that's not a breach of some sort of protocol, to the DEC. And I would, I'm more than happy to reach out to Gail. I think she's back.
Tomorrow.
And let her know to get some comments in. I
Well, I mean, the
think they'd be
comment of the board
supportive.
that you would be saying is that you support
Yeah.
this reclassification, and.
I just want to make sure that they're kind of rolled into the process.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the motion, I think, signifies that this is going to go to them before it goes further on your behalf.
What's the preference, that Joe drafts it up and
Yeah,
you
and
take
that's
it
what-
to the committee tomorrow?
That's what the motion, that's what the agenda item is
Yeah.
that we authorize the town manager
Yeah.
to submit the comments based
And
on.
your comments are basically, if I can paraphrase, we support the reclassification as a board unanimously.
And that,
Yes,
and that
I
would
would
go,
say
and that
so.
would go
Are we all
to
agreed
natural
on that?
resources.
I think the only thing I'd want to make clear is for we should be on record as making them aware of the work that's been done to date on the bridge.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let them know that it's in our CIP, right? It's budgeted for within our,
It's budgeted for.
within the CIP.
It's
That it's a, in the town's view, that there is a compelling need with respect to public health and safety
We're in
for any
line.
modifications or
State funds,
rehabilitation of the bridge.
Yeah, which is,
Right?
that was what my comment was about, was
Yeah.
is there a way to phrase this so that we've made them aware that we anticipate to have to widen the bridge? And whether that was easier to do, whether it was a class 2 or class 1, I don't know the answer to that, but it sounds like, I'm just a little bit worried that as soon as it's classified as class 1, then all of a sudden we can't get a permit to widen the bridge.
Yeah,
And was that your sense at all? No, it was just, we
No, you
just
just have a higher
provide the
burden.
service.
just have to
you
apply to them
you just,
for- yeah, exactly
you just
right.
have to do the
And-
permit.
That it meets a compelling need to protect public health or safety.
I think it's well to keep drawing.
A hard argument to make in this case.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and some of it's speculative. I mean, we're obviously,
So we
the
just
agency
hope.
can't make judgments now, but I think it's well to keep calling attention to it, and maybe we'll get a response, actually. There's a possibility here that in their rulemaking process,
Yes.
they may ask.
No,
And-
they will respond. If
Yeah.
we make a comment, they will respond.
Because the rulemaking is really the serious part of the.
So if you're making your motion, I think I have a gist of what the letter should say.
Good.
I don't even know if we need a motion, do we?
No, I think just
Can we
guidance,
instruct the?
Joe.
Well, I
town
think it would be
manager
good,
to
I think it
prepare-
would be good to do the motion, just so that when I submit the comments, I can say at a duly warned meeting, the select board unanimously approved these comments.
Okay.
And I understand what the 5 of you are, what your position is, so I think it would be more forceful if the comments had your motion.
Right, but
And-
we're
and
instructing
then-
you to
and then-
prepare a written
Yeah, so-
response that will be reviewed by the chair or whoever he.
No, I mean,
No?
I've heard the conversation, it's on tape.
So where
I
is it
think
going to go?
It's gonna go to the SNRCC tomorrow, and then it's gonna
Okay.
go to DEC.
Okay.
So I just moved to authorize the town manager to finalize and submit comments on behalf of the select board with the sense of our comments.
Yes.
With input from the SNRCC regarding the public comment notice for proposed changes to the Vermont wetland rules to reclassify the La Platte River marsh prior to the March, reclassify the Little Platte River Marsh to Class 1 wetlands. Is that good enough?
That works.
Okay.
Super.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Would you signify your approval by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And anyone opposed saying nay? Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, everybody. Good. We're going to move on to the next item, which is to consider adopting a drug and alcohol policy for commercial motor vehicle drivers for the town of Shelburne.
So moved.
Thank you.
I just have one question on this. Obviously, this is.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing.
I thought we did have a second.
I'm just teasing.
No, we have
This obviously, quite exciting. What's the derivation of it? Where did this come from? I mean, I'm sure there was a basis from it.
VLCT, it was kind of part of the initial, when we did the whole personnel policy, this was
Right.
one of the documents, something that we have currently, but it's outdated. And VLCT Passive, which Jerry's a member of that does our insurance, highly suggests that we bring our policy up to date. It's essentially what we have now, just more up to date. We reviewed this with the town attorney and with Paul Goodrich. Really, it mostly impacts his department. And Paul feels good about it, and I recommend we pass it to get it in place, so that we're in the good graces of them.
But my question is there a copy where we can see how it differs from the VLCT policy?
I can send that to you if there are any differences.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I have some just nit comments in here, and there were a few just cut and paste jobs that look like they were carried over from the template. For example, on page 5, at the end of guidance, it says you should state your municipal policy on this issue here. Things like that just probably need a closer read by whoever is finalizing this policy. I assume that's us at some level, but maybe the town manager could just have Ann.
Okay.
There are just parts of it that look like they were carried over from the policy, and we didn't customize it enough, let's say. For example, top of page 8, it says include applicable policy language here. So there are parts of this that you just have to look at a little more closely and make sure that it's not just the template. You can take my copy because I looked at it all and made.
Well, if it's easier, I can, review it. We can
That's
pump this
fine.
to the next
Either
one,
way,
or
yeah.
if they're minor in nature.
It's
but
minor stuff that probably can
I appreciate that.
just be picked up, yeah.
Yeah, I can send some questions, similar type of questions. But it would really help to see how it compares to the original VLCT policy.
All right, we're going to bring this back on the 27th?
Oh, I thought we had a motion to approve it with,
I'm good
I mean,
with
we
it as
could
long as
we can approve it and then look at it again. I mean, I think that it sounds like any edits are
the edits are
minor,
de
maybe a cut
minimis.
and paste.
Yeah, there was
job.
more just cleanup stuff that I don't.
But I
need
do
to
think it would be
review
good,
again
good for us to have this updated.
Yeah.
I would like to review it again.
Okay, I'm happy to.
All right, we can follow through
There's
with
been
the
a
motion
motion.
and vote accordingly, and
I don't have a second yet to the motion.
I seconded.
Oh, you did? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
we can follow through with the motion, vote accordingly, and if it is rejected, then request Joe introduce it on the 27th with comments. All right, we're going to call the question. Those of you who approve the policy as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So we would, with the agreement of all of us, ask Joe to bring it back on the 27th, having addressed these various questions.
Okay.
And the next item is considering approving the town of Shelburne's Class 2 paving grant application to the state of Vermont.
Okay, this is an annual item. We usually get them 2 years in a row, but we have the last 2 years, so maybe third's a charm. We have our $300,000 in the budget starting July 1st. If we get this money, it's just free additional money, and if we don't, we go on with life with our $300,000 that's in the budget. So we make this application every year. And by the charter, the board needs to approve any grant application that we make. So we're asking you to approve our grant application.
So move to approve the Town of Shelburne's Class 2 paving grant application to the state of Vermont.
Second.
Can you tell us where it is on Spear? If you know. You don't
Off
know.
the top of my head, that's a Paul question about the specifics of where on Spear it would be.
And is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those of you who approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. We certainly ought to thank Ann and Paul for their work on this. 15 is to consider, the next item, number 15, is to consider accepting proposed zoning bylaw amendments from the Planning Commission and schedule public hearings. And the obvious person to help us, step us through this would be Jamie, if you're so willing.
I'm happy to. Is the custom of the board to accept them and then wait for
That's
the
what's
public hearing to have a conversation?
Yeah, that's required by our statute, is
Yeah.
that we actually
We
need
just
to
accept them tonight
accept
and then-
them and set a public hearing
And then we
date.
can get into the granular on the changes,
Trying to
right?
figure out what they meant.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the board's clear. I gave you the 3-page memo instead of the entire thing. The entire thing is online, at least in your packet.
Yeah. I mean, some of these we're aware of. from
Yeah,
other issues, but
and Dean and I recommend, if the board is willing to set your public hearing date for April 10th.
April 10th.
That's a regular select board meeting.
Okay, move to accept the proposed zoning bylaw amendments from the Planning Commission and schedule a public hearing for April 10th.
Second.
I
Jamie can
think
have
we
it.
have to include the bylaw change report too. So it's the bylaw amendments plus the bylaw change report that will be warned for public hearing, right?
I think we can. We haven't done that in the
Yeah.
past.
Okay.
But if that's,
Whatever works.
Colleen,
Good.
was there a second? I'm sorry?
Second. Both
All right.
Jamie and I did. I gave it
Any
to Jamie.
further discussion? All those who approve, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed, nay. Unanimously, that's April 10th. Now, we did ask for public comments earlier in the meeting. Do you have one, John?
Yes, I do. And I'd like to preface it by saying I'm a reporter by trade, so you'll forgive me if I'm not great at public speaking. But I believe that the board made a very serious, if accidental, error tonight in the matter of the Colleen Haag Award. It turns out that in delegating the responsibility fundamentally to Colleen and Mr. Grangan, you chose someone who has a known bias against the chief. And Linda passed me this note, which I've confirmed from someone else. Brangan wrote a very unfriendly letter to the board about Chief Warden being an inappropriate candidate. When I was told that he was opposed to the chief, I went out in the hall and he was talking to Chris Boyd, and so I introduced myself and I asked him if he opposed the chief as a choice, as a candidate for the Haag Award, and he said, yes, I do, I'm much opposed. And I said, so you're biased against him? Yes, he said, I am biased. Well, we cannot let the matter rest where you have two people, the axis on which we're relying to make a fair judgment on the award of the Colleen Haag Award, when one party is totally biased against the leading candidate. And so I urge you to do something tonight to set this error right. Thank you.
Any other comment? Linda? Any comments from the board?
I mean, John makes a very good point. And it's hard to argue with that. It certainly was not knowledge that was had before, but since I didn't vote for it, I'm sort of in a situation where, yes, I can see reconsidering it. I thought the discussion that we had, earlier, that we would have the select board follow through with their original goals to make the selection seemed like the right one, but that wasn't how the motion was made. So certainly there could potentially be reason why it could be opened up again, and it could be put off for discussion again at the next meeting. But
Colleen?
Well, I mean, like, it's hard to make a decision when he's not here to say anything. And, and I'm assuming that there's probably no way we could find 5 people in the town that aren't going to have an opinion one way or the other. And I don't understand what he meant by he was biased. Like, he was biased because he was an employee, or he was biased against him personally. And Colleen certainly didn't seem to be biased one way or the other, although she seemed to speak in favor of the chief. I don't feel like I can make a decision without further discussion, and again, having more of the public involved.
I think we would need
It's discouraging.
to amend the agenda to put a new item on, or maybe it's a reconsideration of the old item.
Sorry, Mary, I can't hear what
Sorry. I think sorry, it's after 10, so I'm starting to fade. I think we would have to put it on the agenda again, or treat it as a reconsideration of whatever the item number was.
Let's not lose sight that Jim Brangen's a very good man, and I think that, everything I know about him is he will take this responsibility very seriously. He's been a committed community member for a long time, and to kind of say here after the time has passed and he's left and kind of question his integrity is really unsettling to me. He's been nothing but outstanding with the Boy Scouts and with the fire department. I mean, so let's not lose sight that Jim is a
John,
very,
you made your
very
point.
good guy.
Let the board come to some conclusions here. You've made your point. I don't know what more could be added.
If I could make a suggestion.
No, you can't,
that the
John.
board take it back.
John, thank you. So what is our pleasure? Where are we coming out here? You want to reconsider it next meeting?
No.
No. We want to change anything that was done tonight? Is it any different than the vote that was on tonight?
it may not be. I have no problem
All right.
with reconsidering it, though.
All right. Then we're done, and I will talk to Jim. Okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because at the moment, with all due respect, John, it's got to be hearsay for us. So I will call him, I assure you, and we'll talk it through. And if there seems to be reason for us to reconsider, then we'll come back to Joe and the board, and we'll put that on the agenda. Okay? This issue just simply won't admit the solution, will it? Okay, any other comment? We'll deal with it. Any other comment at this point? Now, I could use your help, Joe, because we're at the point of the executive session, correct?
Yep, so you would be going under, to consider going under executive session under 1 VSA 313, Section 6, to discuss or consideration of records or documents exempt from access to public records provision. So I think you're going to look at a document and determine whether or not you're going to release it.
Okay.
So moved. Just on that first part.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Colleen.
So I would say move into executive session based on 1 VSA 313 and the remainder of what Joe just said, so I don't have to repeat it again.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second it.
Second. And would you signify your approval by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And nay?
Nay.
Nay. Okay. In future meetings, I'm going to put a little placard together. I think that'll be helpful to have without having to rely on you and thankfully Colleen.
I'll do the annotated notes so you have the agenda
Yeah,
item there.
there you
Going
go.
forward.
Now, we also have an item to return to general session
Yes,
and discuss what was discussed, take an action, if any, correct?
yes.
Correct.
To conclude executive session and resume general session.
So moved.
And second. And would you signify your approval by saying aye?
Aye.
And if you are opposed, nay? The ayes have it. We're resuming general session and can report to you, do you want to?
So I think it sounds like the motion that you're going to consider is releasing the Thursday, February 15, 2018 email from the town attorney to the select board per the public records request made by Mike Donahue of the Shelburne News.
So moved.
Second.
Is there further discussion?
Yeah, further discussion is I would just like to say that I do think that the discussion that was had in executive session could have been held in public session without releasing any of the information that was in the document that we reviewed. That since we all had a copy of it, we could talk about it without releasing any information, but then we could do it in public and not in an executive session.
Any other comments? I'll add one, but it's it's strictly from lack of expertise. But my sense of Josh, of course, and I occasionally disagree. My sense, in fact, is that we couldn't have done that because of a technical matter that does not relate to content. But in any case, we're about ready to vote. Is there any further discussion
On this motion?
on this motion? We'll call the question. For those of you who approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those who oppose, nay. I'll entertain a motion, excuse
I
me.
just have one thing to say real quick to my colleagues. I will miss both April meetings, but will attend by phone, one for a medical reason and the other for vacation. So I apologize for the bad timing.
Again, just as final comment, hello, everybody. It's been fun tonight. I'm looking forward to a lot of time together. We can't have quite the same agenda in every meeting, but it's been I thank you all. I thank those of you who have participated, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And seconded by the group, and which will signify approval by aye.
Aye.
And I assume that's unanimous. Thank you, Joe.